Valhalla is one of the best institutes for hunters, with countless people trying to join every year. However, not many people manage to enroll, and less than 150 people even make it to graduation. The selection round takes the form of a battle between candidates for admission. All of this is closely observed by the highest-ranking combat instructor, Adam. Suddenly, Kevin approaches him. He is the heir of the important Yoshin family. Adam immediately asks if Kevin came here just to see his niece. The man answers yes, because in their family everyone expects great success from Olivia. Olivia is a child genius born into one of the top 5 families in Korea, and at the age of 10 she already had the mana capacity of a high school student. At 13, she was able to transfer mana into her sword, and at 16, she competed with her family members and won. Adam asked Kevin if there was anything he didn't know about his niece, and the man replied that they said she could communicate with her family's guardian constellation. The instructor was shocked by what the man answered him. He asks if Kevin really believes this. The man says yes with complete confidence, because that is why he expects a lot from her. The 5 main families have been given their status in Korea because guardian constellations are associated with each of them. Ordinary hunters receive blessings or make a contract with a constellation. But the guardian constellations of the 5 families are different from others. The Yoshin family is the god of swords. Everyone in their family is an excellent swordsman. The Jones family, Holy Spear with the help of mana, can create a spear from any stick that is in no way inferior to a stone one. The Chojin family, Dao King. Despite the shape of their Dao blades, they are amazing at fighting with them, which is beyond the capabilities of other people. The Davis family is the king of the fist, and they have no equal in physical strength. The Dojin family is the god of the bow and can hit any moving object, even the smallest one, with an arrow from any distance. Adam says that if Olivia can actually communicate with her guardian constellation, then she is definitely a genius. Before Olivia's fight even begins, Kevin asks the instructor to also watch his niece. Adam says that in that case he will have to go down and go through the whole crowd of spectators and reporters. Kevin objects and tells Adam to simply put what's happening on screen. The man fulfilled the request, as he himself became interested in looking at it. The Yoshin family's eldest daughter, 17-year-old Olivia, appears on the screen. Her opponent turned out to be a guy named Adrian. He is not a member of any of the 5 main families and almost nothing is known about him. Adam, seeing the guy, says that he is quite calm, to which Kevin suggests that he has probably already given up, since he knows who Olivia is. Meanwhile, Olivia was already eagerly awaiting the start of the fight. Adrian, on the contrary, became bored, which is why he even began to yawn. Continuing to assess Olivia's opponent, the instructor said that the guy seemed to have no fighting spirit at all, and Kevin was completely confident that the fight would end quickly in favor of his niece. So, with 3 seconds left until the start, Olivia readied her sword. 2 seconds before the start, all Adrian did was start to massage his shoulder, while remaining completely calm. When there was 1 second left, the girl's eyes were already full of determination. As soon as the test began, she immediately ran towards the enemy. Olivia, holding the sword with both hands, swung it hard. With a light movement, she cut through the air in front of her, creating a blade of mana. The blade rushed straight towards Adrian. At the last moment, when the blade was about to touch him, he managed to dodge, keeping a mocking smile on his face. Everyone around was taken aback, as absolutely no one expected such an outcome of events. Adrian had won, and from the look on his face it was clear that he had expected nothing less. He wondered why everyone around him was so weak, and if it was true that this was the future 300 years from now. Let's go back 300 years to the Tower of Destruction. A wounded Barchi, the Tower of Destruction boss and God of Destruction, tells Adrian that their battle was excellent. Adrian, who was also the god of martial arts, was also seriously injured just like Barchi. But the guy was able to find the strength in himself and dealt the final blow to the God of Destruction with a kick right in the head. Adrian wins, and at that moment, a system message appears in front of him, which says that he defeated the boss of the Tower of Destruction and the destruction of the world was stopped. At that moment, the tower began to collapse rapidly. Adrian thought that this was the end, since due to the wound he could not leave the tower. And after this mission he was finally going to rest. He had already begun to regret that he had gone to the tower alone, forbidding his disciples to go with him. But he quickly realized that if they had been with him, they would all have died in agony. Adrian had already accepted his imminent death and realized that he could not change anything. But suddenly he wakes up in the body of a 17-year-old boy, 300 years after the victory over the Tower of Destruction. He was pleased with his reincarnation. Although his body was not as strong as before, he still had all his past knowledge. One day, the system message appeared in front of him again, but this time it said that in 5 years the Tower of Destruction would appear again, and he needed to prepare. He began to think that he should have destroyed the enemy completely then, but he decided that it would not help now, and next time he would destroy the tower forever. The guy decided that after fulfilling his duty, he would live a life of prosperity. Immediately after that message, another one followed, telling him to return his weapons and memories to Valhalla School on the 3rd floor, in the 5th room on the right. Adrian was sure that he understood what kind of weapon they were talking about, but he didn't understand what kind of memories they were talking about. He decided to look for Valhalla. And now, the 4th day of the top 10 competition is starting, and the guy hears that those who want to take part should go up to the competition floor. Once everyone had entered the testing area, an announcement was made for everyone to take their positions. Instructor Adam is watching the events again. He noticed that there are more people today than ever before, probably because all 5 main families are gathered here. Adrian's opponent this time was a guy named John. John is a muscular 17-year-old boy and the eldest son of the Davis family. John immediately recognized his opponent today, Adrian. He thought that if he could defeat his opponent, his image would improve. The King of the Fist told his opponent that he would destroy him quickly and that he didn't even have to try. At this, Adrian told John to go to hell and showed the middle finger, at which point the fight began. After what Adrian said, John became furious. He was never distinguished by his mental abilities or success in creativity. His talent was in his physical strength. He was born with superior physical abilities, and even the slightest training made him stronger. He could do things that others could only do with mana. Adrian, meanwhile, continued to show his middle finger and mock John. Then John concentrated all his mana into his fist and rushed at the enemy. Adrian understood that he would not be able to win physically and decided that he would win with the help of agility and cunning. John's fist was rapidly approaching his opponent's face, but Adrian, with one deft tilt of his head, quickly dodged the blow. He then took advantage of the fact that his opponent was pushing gravity forward and hit him in the legs, causing John to fall. The guy didn't expect this. He was confident of his victory before it happened. Without wasting a second, Adrian delivered a decisive blow to John's stomach, causing his opponent to fall and lose consciousness. Adrian won again and once again realized that although his body was weaker than before, it did not create much of a hindrance. The whole thing was being watched by John's father, the head of the Davis family, who immediately realized that Adrian had won through his own cunning. He understood and comprehended the boy's entire combat tactics. He understood that his son could dodge any attack, but not this one, because in this case, all of Adrian's movements were clearly planned. The man concluded that he was moving even faster than his son's top speed. He figured out the guy's brilliant plan and realized all its genius. He was delighted and horrified at the same time. The head of the Davis family decided that he would bring Adrian into his family, no matter what it cost him. As he went out to fight his next opponent, the boy did not understand why grown men were shouting words from the spectator seats, calling a 17-year-old girl a big sister. Adrian's rival was a 17-year-old girl named Roxy, who was the second daughter of the Chojin family. The match began, but neither opponent was in a hurry to attack first. Adrian was surprised that the girl waited and prepared, because all his opponents before this had attacked rather thoughtlessly. He concluded that she was better than the others because she could understand the situation. Then the guy became interested and decided to start moving towards the girl. Roxy immediately began to take out the blade, fill it with mana and change the element, producing lightning. All the spectators were taken aback by what they saw, because she is only 17 years old, and she already has such serious skills. The opponents approached each other, the girl continued to quickly draw her sword, and the guy simply grinned. The girl's eyes were full of determination and confidence. She made a sharp movement of her hand and struck towards Adrian and was bound to hit. But somehow he managed to dodge. The girl was perplexed. The guy said she had a chance if she hadn't shown with her eyes where she would hit. Roxy was taken aback, and Adrian was already standing next to her, ready to take the next step towards victory. He launched a mana strike straight into the girl's chest, thinking that this strike would be decisive. But Roxy was only thrown back by the shockwave. She remained on her feet and did not lose her balance. Adrian realized that he didn't feel what was hitting his body, and the girl was able to block the blow with her sword. Goosebumps ran through the girl's body from how strong the blow was. While Roxy was shocked, Adrian wasted no time in delivering his next blow. He struck straight at the girl's sword with incredible force. She had not yet had time to recover from the previous blow, when the sword, which was aimed with its blade right at the girl's ribs, struck her. Roxy was unable to react and defend herself, causing her to fall. Adrian noticed that something was wrong with his blow, but he didn't focus on it, since the girl was defeated anyway. The guy once again defeated a representative of one of the main families. Adrian was #1 on the list of Valhalla's qualifying trials, entering Valhalla. After the competition, the winner was surrounded by reporters. Each of them urged the boy to join their guild, shouting out certain benefits. Adrian was very angry about this. You could tell from his face that he was furious, and he sent everyone to hell, showing the middle finger. News of this ignoramus quickly spread across the internet. All the comments were filled with people's indignation. Everyone was talking about his bad manners, but the guy didn't care about it. And so, the first day of his training in Valhalla arrived. The guy was not at all interested in hearing about the school's 100-year history, and he was immersed in his thoughts. He noticed that the other students recognized him and showed attention to his person. Adrian had already begun to wonder if he had gone too far yesterday, but he quickly realized that he didn't care what others thought. The guy suddenly remembered the recent system message that had appeared in front of him recently. He remembered that he was only here to get his weapons and memories back. Immediately after the introductory lecture, he quickly left the school with the thought of how to quickly get to the 5th room on the right on the 3rd floor of the school. He headed to his next lesson, which was to take place in the virtual combat simulation room. A young, 24-year-old teacher named Chris was already waiting for the group in the office. The teacher was perplexed by the fact that 3 representatives of the main families were placed in one class at once. Yes, Roxy, John, and Olivia will be in the same class. But when the teacher noticed another guy in the group, he was shocked. Adrian was also assigned to his class. The teacher immediately realized that the year would be very difficult, but he could not remain in thought for long. He calmed down and began the lecture. Chris greeted the students and announced that he was their class teacher. Without waiting long, he decided to start the lesson right away, sharply pressing some button. The space around the students began to change rapidly, and all the students became very scared as they did not understand what was happening. And so they found themselves somewhere in the forest among the trees. Even Adrian was taken aback by this. He immediately began to look around, studying the area. Suddenly, the students began to be surrounded by angry monsters. The students were even more scared, as no one expected this to happen in their first lesson. John immediately assessed the situation, realizing that these monsters were orcs and goblins and that their numbers were quite large. Looking back, the guy returned his head to its previous position and was immediately taken aback by the fact that right in front of his face was already the hand of one of the monsters. The goblin tried to attack John, but he failed because the students were protected by the dome shield. This solid creation was the work of teacher Chris, who was watching the proceedings with a grin. The monsters continued to try to attack the students, but the barrier did its job. While all the students were distracted by what was happening, Adrian heard his teacher calling him. He calmly approached Chris, not suspecting what he was about to offer him. The teacher mockingly asked if the boy would be able to cope with all the monsters on his own. Chris was sure that the students had only seen monsters in books, and by making such an offer to Adrian, he thought that it would humble the boy's ego. But Adrian simply laughed at the teacher's question. Chris was taken aback, not expecting such a reaction. He repeated the question again, hoping that the guy was just bluffing, but he replied that he could handle it without any difficulty. The teacher, still in a state of shock, shouted at Adrian to try it since he was so brave. The student knew that such tasks were usually not given at the first lesson and demanded a reward if he managed to destroy all the monsters. The teacher did not expect such impudence but did not object and promised to fulfill any request within his authority. Adrian agreed to such a reward. Chris warned the student that although the monsters were just a system, they attacked like real ones, to which Adrian simply asked the teacher to give him his sword. The teacher, with distrust but without objection, handed his weapon to the boy. Adrian was flattered by this. He took a good look at the blade and prepared for battle. And then the barrier in front of him disappeared, and he headed towards the orcs. The students abruptly turned their attention from the monsters to the guy who decided that he could win on his own. And then fury flashed in Adrian's eyes, and he struck the first blow, cutting down several monsters at once. With each blow, he destroyed more and more monsters. The orcs tried to attack Adrian from behind, but they were unsuccessful. The guy dodged all the attacks every time and delivered his own blow. He thought that 300 years had passed since he last held a sword in his hands. At that time, the world could not function fully due to monsters, and improvised means were used as weapons. Lost in thought, he didn't notice how an enraged goblin was already trying to attack him from behind. But as usual, the guy dodged his attack. He had long ago realized that the monsters here moved according to a simple pattern. All these monsters are just well-made fakes. The teacher and his students watched closely as Adrian easily destroyed all the orcs and goblins. Chris was incredibly surprised by what was happening, as the sword he gave to Adrian was completely ordinary. The way the guy cut through all the monsters was truly amazing, because there was not a drop of magic in the sword. Olivia watched everything with a very displeased face. To John, everything that was happening seemed completely crazy, and only Roxy looked at it with complete admiration. And so, Adrian defeated all the monsters. He immediately said that his desire was to go down to the Room of the Constellations. With a smirk on his face, he asked Chris if their agreement was still in force. The teacher clearly didn't expect the boy to ask for something like that. And now, the environment has changed again to the familiar office. Chris will announce the end of the lecture. All the students began to leave, and only Adrian could not get up from his place. He was very exhausted after the battle with the monsters. The boy didn't expect that lessons could last so long, since he had never studied at school. His only desire was to find what he needed and quickly leave this place. As he left the school building, he once again became immersed in his thoughts. Even though the lessons today were rather boring for him, he still learned something new about constellations, because in his past life there was no such thing as constellations at all. Constellations are those who have achieved greatness and become gods. Most of them are associated with hunters and give them special powers. And Valhalla is the third largest academy in the world, which contains many relics of the constellations. And so Adrian walked, thinking that he needed to quickly return to the dorm and start training martial arts, since his body was too weak. He was distracted from his thoughts by a female voice that called out to him from somewhere behind. Turning around, he saw Roxy behind him. At this time, an important conversation was taking place in the teacher's room between teacher Chris and instructor Adam. The teacher was talking about how what happened in class today was humiliating for him. He wondered if Adrian was really just a high school student. Adam was very shocked that a guy who had never even seen monsters was able to single-handedly defeat 120 monsters. It was really very strange because Adrian had never seemed special to anyone. Adam explained that Adrian was an orphan and lived in a small orphanage located in a very dangerous area. Chris suggested that the guy might be a spy, but the instructor quickly refuted this, saying that he had already conducted his own investigation and found nothing strange. Moreover, the spy would hardly attract so much attention with his behavior and enter Valhalla. Adam remembered that Chris told him about Adrian's request after defeating the monsters. The instructor decided to touch on this topic. He considered the guy's request strange, since he himself could have gotten there after the first semester, but he decided to offer his help and negotiate with the director about this. The instructor thought that if the guy visited this place earlier, nothing bad would happen. Chris said that he was worried about there being so many geniuses in his class, to which Adam, rushing to console the teacher, said that there was a student from the Ventric family in another class. This guy is from the main Ventric family and his name is Bob Ventric. The teacher heard that this guy was expelled from the British Academy because he was causing trouble. This news made Chris calm down and realize that things weren't so bad in his class compared to the one next door. Let's get back to what's happening between Adrian and Roxy at this time. Adrian turned around, waiting for what the girl would tell him. Roxy asked the boy in a determined voice to teach her how to wield a sword. The guy was completely indifferent to this request, taking it seriously. The girl continued to insist on her own and repeated her request. The guy's face at that moment twisted in an expression of complete incomprehension. He clearly didn't expect such a proposal. The girl said that she absolutely needed to learn fencing, which Adrian had demonstrated then. The guy listened to everything the girl said with absolutely no interest, scratched his ear, and refused. Roxy, who expected a different answer, asked why he refused, to which Adrian said that he simply didn't want to, adding that he would leave if the girl had nothing more to say. She repeated her request once again. What was happening began to irritate the guy very much. He said again that he did not want to do anything with her. He rather rudely ordered Roxy to get away from him and, turning sharply, walked away, leaving the girl alone with herself. And now a new school day has arrived. All the students have already come to school. Adrian thought again about how weak his body was, that it didn't even have magical abilities. But he decided that this problem would be solved when he found what the system message told him. His thoughts were interrupted by a guy who, unnoticed by Adrian, appeared right in front of his desk. It was the 17-year-old son of the main family, Ventric, Bob Ventric, and next to him stood his companion, 17-year-old Alice. Bob, with a smirk on his face, called Adrian by name, to which the guy asked him who he was. The Ventric family representative then thought that the guy was very uneducated since he didn't know his family. Bob introduced himself and with an evil grimace on his face asked if Adrian wanted to become strong. If you delve a little into the structure of the main families, you will notice that it is much more difficult for representatives of the side branches to obtain status, compared to the main branch. However, the Ventric family has a beaked mask, which is what sets them apart from other families. Usually, a family has a constellation guardian of S-class or higher who protects that family, and they choose a family member and give him power. But in the Ventric family, things are different. The guardians may decide to sign a contract with a family member who is not a constellation. Thanks to this distinction, the Ventric family has enormous influence throughout Europe. This also implies that your bloodline doesn't matter at all, as a side branch can have the same power as the main one. Bob Ventric became too arrogant when he felt he had power, which led him to do bad things, and he was expelled from the British Academy. But he didn't take the problem seriously, because thanks to his pedigree, he always gets what he wants. After thinking about how he always got everything, he looked towards Alice with a nasty smile. Bob knew his family could always get him back on track, but he knew he had to get Adrian on his side first. And so, Ventric, standing right in front of the desk where Adrian was sitting, told him that he would lead the boy to his family's constellation if he was on his side. Adrian, with a completely displeased face, asked if Bob was an idiot by any chance. This answer hit Ventric's pride hard, and he was stunned. The girl accompanying him was very embarrassed. Having come to his senses, Bob asked Adrian again what he had told him. The guy said that he was far from stupid, and he immediately understood from Bob's manner of communication that he just wanted to use him. Ventric was furious after hearing this, calling Adrian a dirty and uneducated man. In a fit of rage, he didn't notice how Instructor Adam had already entered the office. The boy was distracted only after the teacher asked him to return to his seat. Bob shouted at the instructor not to use his full name, and Adam replied that Valhalla had different rules than the British Academy. The guy got angry but did not continue the conflict. He just looked very unhappy and angry. He quickly headed towards the door, and Alice followed him. As he left the office, he told Adrian that they would need to talk again, to which Adrian said nothing. Now all the classes are over, and the students once again leave the walls of the educational institution. This time, Adrian was thinking about how he hadn't learned anything new today, but again he was distracted from his own thoughts by Roxy. The girl repeated the same phrase as yesterday, asking the guy to teach her fencing. The guy looked at her with a very displeased face. At this time, an enraged Bob was in the elite dorm room of Valhalla. He circled around and even broke a very expensive lamp with his own fist. Ventric thought about Adrian's insolence, how a lower class could dare to humiliate him like that. He eventually ordered Alice to call another Ventric named Larry and tell him that there was something he needed to do. The girl, without responding to Bob's order, simply looked down at the floor. The guy was already very angry at this point, and the girl's silence was the last straw. He came up and grabbed her by the hair with all his might. Without removing his hand from Alice's head, he demanded that she give him an answer immediately. In a very furious tone of voice, he asked if she still considered herself the eldest daughter of the palace family. He continued to put moral pressure on her, asking if she wanted him to throw her out of the family, to which the extremely frightened girl answered in the negative. Bob threw the defenseless girl with incredible force so that she fell with her whole body right on the floor. Ventric, without an ounce of compassion for the girl, simply repeated his order again, adding that he wanted to get rid of one person. He also said that he wanted to meet the son of the Rice family, who was a second-year student at Valhalla, and demanded that a meeting be arranged with him. This time, the exhausted girl responded obediently. Let's move to Adrian's room, where he trained before going to bed. He trained his abilities to handle mana and attract magic, but he couldn't do anything. He started to think that his body was just trash. Suddenly, he remembered his conversation with Roxy today, who had approached him again after school with the same request. He was very unhappy with her persistence at that moment. The girl continued to follow the guy for a long time, and when he turned around, she simply repeated her request over and over again. The guy simply asked her if she was tired of following him around and if she was a parrot. This began to irritate Adrian quite a bit, and he began to think about how to make her leave. He said that the amount for one lesson would be 10 million won. The girl hesitated, and the guy said that if she couldn't afford it, then he was leaving. Then she sharply asked him to give her his phone number. The guy asked why she needed his phone, but he didn't stop her and obediently handed her his gadget. Roxy said she would write her number down there, explaining that it would make it easier for her to transfer money to him. After that, she immediately gave the phone back to Adrian, who clearly did not expect such an outcome. Turning on his phone, he saw that 100 million won had been credited to his account at once. He was a girl who could afford to pay for 10 lessons at once. Roxy asked again if the guy would now agree to teach her. Adrian, smiling sarcastically, said that he still wouldn't do it and simply refused to accept the money. And so, thinking about everything that had happened before going to bed, he wondered how the student could transfer such a huge amount of money at once. He began to regret that he had refused such a sum, but quickly came to the conclusion that it was even for the best. because he would not have to reveal his secrets. Adrian knew that his main goal at the moment was to find what the system message was talking about. He quickly got dressed, took a shovel, and went to look for the secret storage. And now he is already determined to start searching. Lost in thought, he thought about how he had checked everything in advance before entering Valhalla. But all the important records from 300 years ago had been destroyed. He understood that most likely there were only 3 parts of the records left. Although the sources say that there are 4, most likely they were located in the mountains of Valhalla. Adrian began to emit mana, which began to fill the space around him. This helped him find records that responded to his magic. The guy could do all this, even with a tiny amount of magic. And then one part started to glow blue. The guy quickly found it. He began to dig in the place where the light was coming from. This required a huge reserve of physical strength, which this guy's body did not have. But despite this, he continued to dig. The guy thought that if it weren't for the Tower of Destruction 300 years ago, he wouldn't have buried them at all. He finished excavating only at dawn. The tired guy stood near the hatch and couldn't believe that he had finally managed to do it. He quickly found the keyhole that opened the hatch leading down. Since a normal key couldn't open it, Adrian began making a key from his own mana. He did it quickly enough and proceeded to open the hatch. The guy was very exhausted, but at the same time happy that he had succeeded. And so he opened the hatch and climbed down, landing on a mountain of jewels. Adrian, standing in a victorious pose, looked at all the wealth surrounding him at that moment. Now he could not worry about money for a long time, but he came here not only for wealth, he was looking for storage stones. The guy quickly discovered them and began to pour a small amount of mana into them to activate them. In return, they gave him even more magic. Now that it was time to go back, he thought about how to get all this money and gold. It's a new school day at Valhalla School. Since Adrian worked physically all night instead of sleeping, he did not have time to rest and came to class in a terrible state. Suddenly, Roxy came up to him. The guy even got a little scared from the surprise. Roxy, indeed, repeated the same thing like a parrot, asking Adrian to teach her the art of swordsmanship. The guy was no longer angry. He calmly asked why the girl still couldn't calm down. He learned that her family, which is one of the main ones, is the best in swordsmanship. Adrian said that she will get more information from her family. To this, Roxy replied that she wanted to learn from him, and no one else would suit her, since Adrian was the best in swordsmanship of anyone she had seen. The guy became embarrassed and asked what about her father, since he was the head of Chojin. The girl's face immediately changed. She became colder and her gaze became glassy. At this point, their conversation was interrupted by teacher Chris, who called Adrian to go to the teacher's room. The guy asked him again why he specifically needed to go there. The teacher said that this was related to what they talked about last time. Adrian immediately became inspired, grinned, and began to get up to quickly follow Chris to the teacher's room. Roxy felt awkward, and when the guy was already leaving, she called out to him and asked for forgiveness. She looked down at the floor, losing all hope that the boy would eventually agree to teach her. And suddenly, Adrian turns around and sets a date for the classes. He said that it will happen tomorrow at 6 in the morning on the training ground. The girl was taken aback, and the guy asked again if she had changed her mind. This question brought the girl to her senses, and she began to rhythmically shake her head from side to side. Then she said that she would definitely come. Now Adrian had already come to the teacher's room, waiting for what the teacher would tell him. Chris said that the boy was approved for a pass to the constellation room. This news made the student very happy. But then the teacher said that the guy would just have to go down to the basement. Adrian, not expecting this, asked again if he had heard everything correctly. Chris answered this question positively and added that the guy would not be allowed to go below the first floor. Adrian, not listening to what Chris was trying to say next, asked when he could go there. To this, the teacher said that he could come tonight if he had the opportunity. Adrian said that he would come. The teacher was confused that the boy did not argue about the ban on the second floor. He did not think that Adrian would agree so easily. After that, Chris said that the conversation was over and the guy could go. And so the night came. Chris and Adrian came to the appointed place. The guy immediately began to look around, studying the area. He noticed that there were at least 2 guards at each door. Also, all the outer walls were very well protected by all types of magic. Adrian asked if he could ask teacher Chris one more question, but the teacher responded positively. Then he asked how hard it was to get down to the second floor and whether it was necessary to do something criminal to do this. The teacher said that it was not difficult and no crime was needed, but if the boy did it, he would be expelled. Moreover, Adrian will go crazy before he can even leave school. He explained this by saying that the second floor contains the terrifying magic of the constellations, and if you touch it, it tears apart the consciousness, and the person goes crazy. The guy grinned, said that he understood everything and started moving towards the entrance. Chris could only hope that Adrian was smart enough not to go down to the second floor. The teacher only had time to shout that Adrian had 30 minutes to do everything. The guy replied that he would be back soon and entered the building. Upon entering, he immediately opened a message in the system to refresh his memory and quickly find everything. He didn't care whether he was expelled or not because he came to Valhalla only for this. And so he began to go down to the third floor. He walked, surprised that there were a lot of steps in this building. And so he found himself in some strange hall and assumed that it was a prison. He was sure that on the first floor there was a room of constellations, but everything indicated that it was indeed a prison. While the guy was thinking, the system message appeared in front of him again, which said that Adrian had fulfilled the conditions and would be moved to the room. The space around the bewildered Adrian began to change rapidly. When he moved, what he saw shocked him. Before him stood the god of destruction, Barchi, whom Adrian had fought 300 years ago in the Tower of Destruction. The guy couldn't get over his shock and simply asked if it was really Barchi. The god of destruction gave a positive answer and said mockingly that this reunion should take place after 300 years. Without giving Barchi time to finish, Adrian had already delivered the first blow straight to his opponent's jaw. In the midst of his emotions, he dealt a fairly powerful blow, knocking the god of destruction off his feet. He shouted that it was incredible to see Barchi, while his face expressed genuine anger. Barchi tried to stop it and asked the guy to stop, but it didn't help. Adrian's fist landed on the god of destruction's jaw again. The beaten man did not lose hope of stopping the blows and again tried to ask the guy not to do it. Adrian, not listening to what Barchi was telling him, continued to hit him and scream, telling him to die. And then the guy finally stopped. Having let off all his steam on Barchi, he said that he usually does not use fists to sort things out. The god of destruction thought at that moment that there would be no more blows in his direction. But he was wrong. Adrian raised his leg and kicked Barchi, who was lying on the floor. With all his might, he did this in revenge for what happened 300 years ago. The guy was about to strike again, but he was distracted by a question that Barchi asked. He asked why the guy wasn't interested in what kind of place was around them. Then Adrian became really interested in it. He started looking around and realized that there was nothing around, only emptiness. Barchi had just gotten to his feet by this time and was shaking off the dust, while telling the guy that they were in a world of imagination, or more precisely, a space and a relic. Adrian was surprised, as it turned out that in front of him stood only the incarnation of Barchi in the world of imagination, and his real body was destroyed 300 years ago. He asked the god of destruction if he understood correctly that he had been inside the relic all this time, to which Barchi responded in the affirmative. This fact meant that Barchi himself had now become a constellation. Adrian's face turned into a furious grimace again, and he struck his opponent in the face again. And now, the time the guy had to stay on the first floor, allocated by teacher Chris, had expired, and the teacher was already waiting for the guy at the entrance. And so Adrian finally came out, the guards checked him, and he went towards the teacher. Chris immediately asked if the guy had done anything strange. The boy replied that he, of course, did nothing because he was afraid of going crazy, and the teacher, after these words, told him to go home. Then Adrian simply turned around and actually walked towards the house as the teacher had told him to. He walked, once again replaying the conversation with Barchi in his head, remembering all the details. Then he asked Barchi whether he was the creator of that pop-up message in the system or not. And what was it anyway? The god of destruction simply said he had no idea. For this, Adrian grabbed Barchi by the collar of his suit and lifted him up, swinging his fist. Barchi, frightened, said that he was telling the absolute truth. And in general, he had been locked up here for 300 years after that battle. Then the guy put him down on the ground and asked who was sending the messages then. Adrian listened attentively, as Barchi said that he too had been sent a message that spoke of Adrian being reborn. He said that thanks to this, a suspicious person surfaced who possibly made him the owner of the Tower of Destruction. But Barchi didn't know who this man was, since his memories had not yet fully returned. He asked Adrian what was in his notice, and the boy told him everything without hesitation. But he didn't understand what kind of memories he was talking about. It seemed to him that he already remembered everything that happened in the tower 300 years ago, down to the smallest detail. Barchi suggested that the guy thought so because his memories had not returned yet. But this would happen soon since he had already found the weapon. Adrian, not understanding what was being discussed, asked what weapon Barchi was talking about. The god of destruction replied that this place was the inner world of the 4 village swords that had become sacred relics. He added that he became a constellation because he used the sword as a relic. This suddenly sent Adrian into a fit of rage again, and he began shouting insults at Barchi. Remembering all this on the way home, Adrian still couldn't understand how his village sword became a relic with a constellation inside. He wanted to destroy this artifact and leave it there, but he also did not want to leave Barchi unattended and took the sword with him. Besides, most likely, the new task from the system would have been impossible to complete without this sword. Once again, his thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling out to him from behind, asking if he was the winner of the Valhalla qualifying trials. Turning around, the guy saw a gang of guys who were clearly hostile. They said that they were older than Adrian, demanding respect. The gang was led by a second-year student at Valhalla Academy, who was also the eldest son of the Sunrise family, Eric. Adrian, keeping the absolute, asked if bullies like them could also have juniors. The gang members really didn't like the fact that the guy wasn't scared at all, and on the contrary, he was showing impudence. And then one guy from the gang, completely confident in his abilities and not seeing a threat in Adrian, volunteered to be the first to beat the guy up. As soon as he took the first step towards Adrian, he immediately kicked him in the stomach. Adrian, in anticipation of the fight, urged the guy to start quickly. He delivered the next blow by jumping into the air and hitting with the same foot, but this time in the face. The guy could not resist such a blow. He simply did not have time and was defeated. The blow sent the bully flying straight into the crowd of his gang. The blow was so strong that when the guy had already fallen, but continued to roll along the ground by inertia, an impressive track was left behind him. At this moment, the guy's confidence diminished a little. Eric looked at Adrian, who already had his artifact sword in his hands. He didn't understand how the guy ended up with a weapon, since he definitely didn't have one just now. At that moment, Adrian's eyes sparkled and a slight madness appeared on his face. He said that if everyone stood like a pillar, he would smash everyone's skulls. Let's go back 3 hours to when Bob was talking to Eric in his house. He told Eric to take care of one first-year student, meaning Adrian. Of course, he promised a reward in the form of helping Eric's family. Bob said that even the use of weapons was allowed, explaining that with the help of his connections, he would be able to hush everything up. Eric, without thinking twice and having no idea who Adrian was, agreed. When he left, he thought that they would easily deal with Adrian, since he was only a first-year student. And the differences between first and second years were quite significant. Valhalla students go to the Constellation Room in the second semester of their first year and make a contract with a constellation, only then do they become sophomores. The thought that Adrian didn't have a contract with a constellation yet and wasn't a member of a special family, which meant he didn't have a guardian constellation, was very encouraging to Eric. But everything turned out to be far from what the guy thought. Adrian continued to punch the short-haired bully. Another gang member decided that he would be the second to attack Adrian, and so the red-haired boy was already preparing, pouring his own mana into his knife. But before he could even take a step towards Adrian, he was already hit in the face with the blunt side of the sword. The bully flew into the air, flying to the side. And now the third person is trying to harm Adrian, attacking from behind. It seemed that this daredevil had succeeded, unlike the others, and he struck. But it turned out that Adrian easily dodged, and the blow was simply delivered to the ground. Laughing at what had happened, Adrian was already swinging his sword to strike the guy in the face. Adrian hit the daredevil right in the forehead with great force. This blow caused the guy to also rise into the air and fly a decent distance. Then Eric became seriously tense, not understanding why the second-year students were losing to one first-year student, and he also didn't understand what kind of strange sword technique Adrian was using. At this moment, Adrian was already waiting for the next attacker, waving his sword. But all the gang members lost their fighting spirit. Then Adrian pointed his sword towards the gang and reminded them that he would smash the heads of those who stood like pillars. Eric, realizing that his gang members were seriously doubting their abilities, shouted that there was nothing to be afraid of because he was an ordinary freshman. This amused Adrian a little. He said that the gang leader even had a little courage. Eric didn't like this. He swung his weapon and told the freshman to shut up. At that moment, Adrian had already put his sheathed sword to Eric's stomach. It happened lightning fast. The guy put his palm to the butt of his weapon, mockingly told his opponent not to stand still, and sharply pressed on the sword, using mana. A strong wave of mana hit Eric's body, and he, just like his friends before, was thrown to the side. He thought that he didn't understand how Adrian had managed to get so close to him so quickly. Falling from the blow, Eric instantly lost consciousness. He woke up when Adrian hit him on the cheek, calling him a miserable brat. Adrian immediately started asking about who they were and why they had gathered and decided to fight him. Eric, calling Adrian hard of hearing, aggressively repeated that they were his senior sophomores. Adrian asked if a bunch of second years with guns attacking a freshman was normal for their gang. Adrian also demanded to know who sent them, but Eric, hesitating, replied that they simply wanted to wipe the nose of the best first-year student at the Valhalla qualifiers. Adrian mockingly said that he was going to cry, noting that it sounded ridiculous and like a gangster tribute. After that, he took the bag, started to leave, and told Eric to clean everything up. Eric, starting to lift the body of the earth, said that Adrian would not be able to attend school normally now, since he would be expelled as soon as they found out about this incident. Adrian replied absolutely calmly that he didn't care, because people would only find out about it if Eric himself told them. He added that Eric's gang's reputation would suffer if everyone knew that a crowd of seniors came to beat up a freshman, and he took them out, an argument that made Eric very angry. Adrian added that Eric should think carefully before telling anything if he wants to continue going to school and join the guild. After this, the guy calmly left, leaving all the gang members lying on the asphalt. And so the morning of the next day arrived. Bob Ventrick waited impatiently for a call from Eric, hoping for good news. Finally, the sophomore called. Bob greeted him as an older man, showing mock respect, and asked if they had beaten Adrian well, to which Eric said that he was turning down the job. This shocked Bob, as he had not expected this at all. Bob, no longer trying to seem respectful, asked again what Eric had told him. The second-year student said to stay away from anything related to Adrian. Eric was about to hang up, but Bob told him to wait and began to suggest an alternative plan. He said that if Adrian beat up his gang, then you can simply report it to the administration, and if there are still visible wounds, then this will be evidence. Bob also added that in this case he would also pay the entire promised amount and try to get the Ventrick family to finance Eric. Eric himself already knew the answer to this proposal. He replied that they would not do that because his gang would never be able to restore their honor after that, after which he hung up. Ventrick again did not expect a negative answer to such a proposal. His face expressed anger and incomprehension. In a fit of rage, he threw his phone on the floor, causing the gadget to shatter into pieces. Bob, with his head in his hands, called Alice, asking if she had contacted Larry. The girl replied that she had conveyed everything, but since he was far away, it would take him time to get to them, which made Bob even more angry. At this time, Larry was in Mexico at the Aripia Academy. He, blue on a pile of students he had defeated after another fight, learned that Bob wanted Larry to fly to Korea. He learned that Bob needed him to deal with a man named Adrian, and for this he would receive a reward that had already been prepared. Larry's scarred face twisted into a mentally ill expression. He really liked the offer. Fast forward to 6 o'clock the next morning, straight to the gym. Adrian had just arrived and was ready to start training. But he got scared when he heard Barchi's voice. For a second he was stupefied because he didn't understand what was happening. Barchi said that he was in a sealed sword and did not understand why Adrian was so surprised. Adrian said he was afraid that Barchi had somehow managed to get out, because then he would have to beat him again and put him back. The guy started stretching before training, and at the same time asked Barchi if everything was okay with the sword. He was worried that the sword was an artifact kept in Valhalla, and they left the Constellation Room, taking it with them. Barchi said there was no need to worry because he left a line there, but Adrian said that was exactly what he was afraid of. Adrian asked where Barchi learned to create replicas, to which he replied that it happened when he woke up and lost all his power, but from the very beginning he could create replicas. Engrossed in conversation with Barchi and continuing his warm-up, Adrian didn't notice Roxy entering the room. Opening his eyes, he saw a girl in front of him who was already ready for training. The guy greeted the girl and was glad that she came after all. Roxy asked again if he would teach her how to wield a sword now that she was here. Adrian said no, adding that they would start by pumping up her stamina. The girl asked why, and the guy replied that she could leave if she didn't want to. Roxy immediately said that she would do everything. Then Adrian smiled and told her to start stretching. The girl began to do exercises, and Adrian thought about the strangeness of modern training methods. He thought it was wrong that everyone paid so much attention to mana, but didn't pay attention to stamina. Even Roxy, who had a huge amount of mana, had extremely low stamina. While Adrian was thinking, Roxy had already finished stretching. Then they began a full-fledged workout, starting with push-ups, which were difficult for the girl. Then there were squats. Roxy did regular ones, and Adrian did squats with dumbbells, since his physical strength was already on a completely different level. Next comes an exercise for the arm muscles using dumbbells. After all this, the girl lay down on the floor trying to catch her breath, and thinking that this was the end of the workout. But Adrian had other plans. He said they were just getting started. The girl, thinking it was a joke, asked again what the guy said. Adrian said that they still had 20 kilometers to run. The girl couldn't believe her ears, but agreed, although she had practically no strength left. Now it was time for school. Before the lesson, Adrian thought about how, even though this time the training was more difficult, Roxy still managed, which meant that her powers were worthy of development. At this moment, the girl sat motionless at her desk. She was completely exhausted at the very beginning of the day. And so the lecture began. A high-class instructor and teacher of the topic of spatial monsters, Lilia, entered the class, who immediately ordered everyone to be silent. She said that today they would have a simple written test, which she warned about. All the students listened to her attentively. Everyone started to do it. Adrian finished faster than anyone else. Lilia announced that time was up and that the tests needed to be passed forward, starting from the back desks. She said that today's test will not affect the students' grades, but will be used to assess their knowledge. After that, she said goodbye to everyone and left the office. At this point, Barchi contacted Adrian, asking if the guy was sure he could write such answers. Adrian thought it was awkward that Barchi was watching him do the test. Only then did the god of destruction explain to the boy that he could read his thoughts regarding himself. Having understood the situation, Adrian said that he only answered as he knew. At this point, Lilia had already started checking the work in the teacher's room, and it seemed like all the work had been done well. But one work really angered her. She couldn't understand whether they could really be considered answers at all. Teacher Chris, who had just made coffee and was about to take a break, passed by. He saw that Lily was very unhappy about something and felt angry. The teacher asked if she was currently checking his class's tests, to which she replied yes. She said that she had assigned the students to learn how to properly kill monsters in order to prepare for the combat simulation in the next class. Lilia added that the class was quite strong. There are children from 3 main families in the class and everyone did quite well. Chris said that since everything was great, he would go further, and Lilia gave her approval. As soon as he moved away and was about to take a sip, he heard a sharp cry behind him, which made him splash the drink. He turned around and saw that Lilia was screaming. She was screaming that she didn't understand how the student dared to call these the correct answers. Lilia added that it was Adrian, and that not only did he not try hard at his work, he was actually making fun of the class. She wasn't going to ignore it. She said that at the next lesson she would show him his work and explain that monsters can't be killed so easily. 1 week passed. A lesson began in the battle simulation room, which was conducted by teacher Lilia. She told the whole class that she had brought their past tests and that most of the results were very good. But there was one flaw. After these words, she told Adrian to come to her. He obediently followed her order, while Lily herself watched him closely with a displeased face. She thrust the test forward with a sharp movement of her hand and told him to take it, adding that having 0 points on such an easy level test was unacceptable. The guy objected, saying that he took the job very seriously. The first task was to name the most effective way to deal with the stone goblin. The guy wrote that his stomach needed to be cut open, and Lilia started to get irritated after that. To the second question about what a person would do if he saw 8 jungle goblins coming towards him, Adrian replied that he would start with the closest one, and the flood would pierce each one in turn. The teacher could not believe the seriousness and effectiveness of such methods. She asked again whether the guy really thought he could win with such methods. Adrian said that of course he could. Lily got angry. It seemed to her that the guy was just talking nonsense. Then she calmly said that since he was confident in his abilities, she would give him the opportunity to prove his methods, and press the button. The space around the students began to change again. Adrian wasn't as scared as he was the first time. He saw that there was a monster behind the barrier. The teacher said that if the boy killed the monsters the same way he wrote in the text, she would correct his grade. The guy, without thinking, put the test on the table and went to take the necessary weapon. Taking the necessary sword, he went towards the enemy. Lily was sure that, although he was able to defeat 120 goblins on his own, he would not be able to defeat a stone goblin with 1 blow. The guy was already standing in front of the enemy in the meantime. The goblin decided to attack first. Grinning, Adrian swung his sword at the stone goblin. With a sharp movement of his hand, he pierced his opponent's stomach through and through. Instantly, the monster's simulation began to disappear, indicating the guy's victory. And then the monster completely dissolved. The sword fell to the ground with a crash. The teacher, not expecting such an outcome at all, could not say a word. Olivia, who, like all the students, was watching the fight, was taken aback. She could not understand how he killed the stone goblin with an ordinary sword. John didn't understand what just happened either. Only Roxy at this moment once again admired Adrian's strength. Finding the strength within herself, Lilia finally asked how he was able to do this. The guy, not understanding why such a stupid question was asked, simply replied that he had just hit him in the stomach with a sword. Lilia understood that in order to defeat such a monster with a sword, one must have at least a Class A contract. And in a normal situation, it would be logical to deal with this monster with a blunt weapon. The guy asked mockingly if his answer was ultimately correct. The teacher said it would depend on the second task and quickly pressed the next button. The environment changed its shape again. Adrian found himself right in front of the entrance to the tunnel, on the walls of which lit torches were burning. Lily, when the guy turned his head away from the entrance, told the guy to be more attentive and look back. 3 jungle goblins began to emerge from the tunnel. The difference between these goblins and the normal ones was that they had problems with aggression. And if you do something wrong, the goblin will use the roar skill so that the rest of the goblins in the area will come running to help. She thought that usually a mage would either try to kill everyone at once or run away. There were only 3 goblins in front of the boy at the moment, but he didn't know that there were 5 more that would attack him immediately if the boy made a mistake. And so Adrian, throwing the sword from one hand to the other, headed towards the enemies. She attacked the monsters furiously, putting all her strength into the blow. He landed his first blow right on the forehead of one of the goblins. Lightning fast, he launched his next blow straight into the throat of the second goblin. And so, after a couple of blows, all the monsters were defeated. Lily, seeing this, could not believe her eyes. The guy turned around and said that he had completed the second task as well, smiling. The next day came and Adrian and Roxy were already in the training room. They were running on a treadmill. The guy was doing well as usual, but the girl was already feeling a loss of strength. When she had run the required distance, she fell to the floor in a star pose and tried to catch her breath. Adrian asked why she had such a hard time with these exercises, since she should have trained in her clan before. The girl replied that she usually doesn't push herself like that. The guy asked how she was going to fight monsters if she didn't train like this. Roxy said she could use magical power by borrowing it from the constellation. Adrian expected such an answer, since such people rely on constellations and train magic, not endurance. He wondered what such a person would do if he ran out of mana during a fight, or the constellation simply didn't give him magic. He then asked if Roxy thought these exercises were useless. Roxy replied that she would do them, since the guy promised that he would teach her fencing. To this, the guy asked the next question, wondering if the girl was doing this just because he said so. He quickly realized that he had asked the wrong thing and told the girl to forget about it, adding that classes would start soon, so the training was over. The guy himself was in no hurry to leave, so Roxy asked why he wasn't leaving. Adrian replied that he would do one more approach and asked if the girl wanted to continue too. A second later, he said that it was better for her to go to school, and the girl did not object, left the hall, saying goodbye to the guy. So, when he was putting the discs on the barbell, Barchi contacted him and asked if the girl's name was Roxy, to which the guy replied yes. The guy said that he agreed to train with her only because she was pestering him with her questions. Barchi asked if Adrian had ever shown her his sword technique, to which the boy said no, but she had seen it during a fight in class. Barchi was surprised that she was able to see the power of this technique just by seeing it once. Adrian said that he found it interesting too. At that moment, the guy heard that he was not alone in the hall and turned his head. John was lying next to him, lifting a barbell. He was just finishing his training and also noticed Adrian. Adrian asked how long John had been in the hall. He replied that he always trains here and has been here since the morning. After these words, he went to the exit. Adrian noted that due to his predisposition, John could train for very long periods of time, which meant that his endurance was good. He told Barchi that this guy's approach to training was more sensible than others. The guy asked the god of destruction what these constellations do anyway. Barchi said that although he is also a constellation, because he was imprisoned for 300 years, he knows nothing about others like him. He added that the guy could learn more about this if he completed the system's task. A new task had already appeared in the system, which said that now you need to visit the Eye of the Great Forest of Valhalla, the home of Rona. But be sure to take the Heavenly Sword. He knew this was the survival site they would visit at the end of the first semester. The guy thought that if it weren't for these tasks, he would have gotten out of here as soon as he took his things. Adrian decided that he could not leave this place until he completed this task. Let's move to the United Kingdom in London to the Bentrick family mansion. On the walls of the entire mansion hung paintings depicting their relic mask and the masks themselves. At the head of the long table sat the owner of the house, Kayla Ventrick, and at the other end stood a servant. He reported to the chief that the labyrinth on the border had been taken care of. To this, the woman replied that this was very good work and asked if there was anything else to report. He said he wanted to hire a few competent people he had recently found, one of whom was the only survivor of the Robert clan. He then added that he had found another one. Both of them were A-rank contractors. Kayla approved the decision and said that after testing their abilities, they should be sent to her. The servant hesitated, not knowing whether to talk about another situation. But in the end, he made up his mind and said that he had something to tell about Bob Ventrick. He said Bob called Larry to South Korea. Kayla was very angry when she heard this news. Larry Ventrick was a very troubled child and a serious criminal. He committed numerous crimes using his family's name. At 19, he killed 5 people at an English academy over a simple argument, and at 20, he was already kicked out of his family. Kayla ordered the servant to follow Larry on Bob's behalf, to which the servant meekly agreed. She also said to warn Bob that if he was caught doing anything strange, he would be kicked out of the family just like Larry. The servant said that he understood everything and that was the end of the report, after which he left. Kayla thought that their family's strength wasn't meant for trash like these guys. Praising herself, she was sure that all this power was intended only for her. Looking at the picture of the constellation, she asked if she was thinking correctly. Let's move back to Valhalla, where all the students were already sitting in the lecture. The teacher explained that monsters often act alone, but sometimes they can team up. Adrian was bored listening to the teacher, since he already knew this information, and he was lost in his thoughts. He thought about the benefits of his training, as he felt that he had clearly become stronger. The guy didn't understand why this body was in such bad condition before training. He recalled that when he practiced chi circulation on the first day, he was barely able to finish because he had less mana than an ordinary person. And the physical condition of his body was so bad that he almost lost consciousness from a short period of working with a shovel. He wondered if something might have happened to this body in the past. The guy leaned back in his chair and decided not to focus on this for long. His thoughts were interrupted by a hand reaching towards his desk. Adrian immediately noticed her. It was Olivia, placing a folded piece of paper on Adrian's desk, looking him in the eye. The guy immediately took the note in his hands and began to unfold it. There was nothing on the piece of paper except the word "hey." And so the classes finally ended. Chris announced some important information at the end. He said that this weekend the students would be able to leave the academy if they filled out an application. And with that, he ended the lesson. After the lecture, Adrian immediately went to the teacher's room with a statement. He was made to stop by a voice behind him that simply said, "Hey." Adrian turned around and saw Olivia approaching him. He said one single word, "What?" In that note, to the written word "hey," he responded with the same word "what," and the girl then ignored him. He asked the girl to speak faster as he was busy and in a hurry to submit the application. Olivia hesitated and couldn't put words together, just muttering something under her breath. The guy rudely told her to be faster and called her crazy. Olivia couldn't stand it and got angry at Adrian, asking why he called her that. Adrian said it was because it wasn't normal to piss someone off the way she did. He asked again what she wanted from him, but the girl hesitated again. She remembered that when she watched him fight, he killed a stone goblin with one blow of his sword. Although such a method is not in the books, Olivia wanted to ask how he was able to kill him. As soon as she started speaking, Teacher Lilia suddenly appeared between them and sharply asked the same question that Olivia wanted to ask. Adrian was surprised at how quickly she appeared here. He said that it was very unexpected, since he thought that she hated him. But Lilia denied this, saying that she didn't care what happened then. She said that she thought there was only one way to kill a monster. But Adrian showed her otherwise. She asked if the guy wanted to be her assistant. Adrian said he refused and went towards the teacher's room. Lilia continued to beg him and followed him. They left, leaving Olivia alone. The girl decided that she didn't really need it and didn't follow them. And so the next day came. Adrian went to the place he planned to visit. This place was Aranak. The previous evening, he had been looking for information about this place. He had to find a trading forum where he could sell the jewelry he found from the vault. At the moment when he found what he needed, Roxy wrote to him, saying that she would not be able to come to training tomorrow. Adrian wrote that he would also be busy tomorrow. Roxy started sending a huge amount of stickers. The guy didn't know how to stop her, but he resigned himself and just continued to study the information, which said that he needed to follow the link and get a reservation and location. And now he is already going to that very place. He was looking for some old cafe. When he found it, he noticed that the cafe was really very old, that even the letter on the sign had practically fallen off. He went inside. Everything around was broken, furniture was scattered. There were cobwebs all around. Adrian, reading the place indicated in the message, moved towards the right corner. There he saw a door and went towards it. And so he came out, leaving this abandoned cafe. He knew that this was his first time here, but he felt a strange feeling, as if he had been here before. Especially the purple sky and the cloudy moon seemed most familiar to him, similar to those he had seen 300 years ago. As he walked further, he heard a voice from behind him asking if this was his first time here. It was a tall man in a leather suit. Adrian realized that this was the worker mentioned in the letter. The man asked if this was the guy's first time here and if he knew how the market worked. Having shown the money, he replied that he had an idea. He then handed the stack of money to the man, who dutifully took it. He spent a large amount of money on this, and he only had 30,000 won left. The man said that Adrian could ask him questions if he wanted, to which the guy said that he wanted to ask the worker one thing. He asked where he needed to go to sell the jewelry. The worker asked if the guy was looking for an auction, and Adrian replied that he just wanted to sell it quickly. The man said that in that case, he needed to go to the third quarter because there were many merchants there who would buy anything from him, from weapons to jewelry and much more. Adrian asked to be told which of the merchants was the most reliable. The worker recommended a merchant named Morris, as he was famous for his best prices and specialized in jewelry. Adrian asked where exactly the third block was, and the man pointed and told him to go straight ahead and not turn at the fork. The guy thanked him and was about to leave, but the man added one more thing. He handed the guy a black mask with ear flaps and said that he strongly recommended walking around the market wearing it. Considering the products sold in the market, almost everyone prefers to wear masks. The guy thanked the man again and turned around to leave. The worker bowed after the guy and wished him a good time. Here the guy arrived at the third quarter of the market. Everyone around was really wearing the same masks. He noticed a merchant who was examining a diamond with the help of a special device. The boy approached him and said that the merchant must have been Morris, to which he gave him a positive answer. Adrian said he had a few items he would like to sell right now. Morris said it would depend on the specific item, but if it was gold or jewelry, there would be no problem. At this point, Adrian had already put his hand in his backpack to find his goods, and then he took out a small black bag with strings from his backpack. He threw it on the table in front of the merchant, saying that he wanted to sell all the jewelry in this bag. Morris slowly opened the bag and, seeing the contents, asked if these were rings. The merchant took one of the rings and began to examine it carefully, turning it in his hand. He did this with the same device with which he examined the diamond. Morris was shocked by what he realized and exclaimed that he could not believe his eyes. In his hands was a real magnificent ring of the era of destruction. At this moment, the merchant was only thinking about whether the rest of the jewels were so valuable. He looked again into the bag that contained all the other decorations. Then he was simply speechless. All the jewels were from the same era. Adrian distracted him from his delight. The guy asked how much the merchant was willing to pay for all this. After these words, the merchant began to carefully examine the jewelry again. He couldn't understand where the guy got such artifacts from, because judging by his voice, he was only about 20 years old. Without thinking twice, Morris asked where the guy got these jewels from. Adrian said he had heard that it was not customary to ask such questions in this market. Morris seemed to be brought out of his trance by these words, and he replied that the guy was right and apologized to him. Immediately after this, the merchant thought that he had almost lost his reputation. Despite the significance of the jewelry and its quantity, Morris did not deceive the guy and said that he did not have enough money to buy all this and handed the bag back to the guy's hands. Adrian asked where he could get money for them then. The man pointed down the street, saying that the auction room was there. The boy asked the merchant how long it would take to sell all the tools. Morris said the time will be about 2 or 3, as many people book slots in advance, so it will be some time before the auction hill opens. Adrian asked if he would have to come in person to collect the money. After thinking about it, the guy asked how much the merchant would buy them from him for. Morris thought seriously and started counting. He quickly wrote down some number on his phone and showed it to Adrian. The guy was shocked that the price for it was so high, and the merchant was willing to provide it. Adrian continued asking questions and learned that the merchant was willing to pay 3/4 of the principal amount, which was also a huge figure. The man added that these were just his rough calculations, and if the guy went to the auction, things would go completely differently. Adrian was happy with the amount and told Morris that he agreed. Morris couldn't believe what he had just heard and asked the guy again. After all, these decorations were very expensive in their time, but now they have become even more expensive. The reason for the constant price increase was the constellations. The constellations that began to appear after this era reacted strangely to artifacts from it. Thanks to this, a commoner was able to make a contract with an S-class constellation. Morris thought that guy was still a contracted soldier. Morris thought about this as he looked at the ring again more closely, and noticed how incredibly powerful magic enveloped the jewel. He realized that the magic of that time still existed, and he also reflected on how incredibly lucky he was to have bought such meaningful things for such a small amount of money. The merchant decided that today was clearly his lucky day, but his thoughts were interrupted by a silhouette that created a shadow that blocked Morris's light. The merchant was shocked that the silhouette that appeared in front of him out of nowhere turned out to be the Black Cat, and also the owner of the market. At this time, Adrian had already stepped over the threshold of the abandoned cafe through which he had entered the market before. He took off his mask, thinking about how awkward it was. The guy looked around a little to see if he had really come through this cafe, and he realized that this was it. Then he took out his phone again and looked at his bank account, which had recently been replenished with a large sum of money, which made the guy very happy. He knew that if this money ran out, there were still many different treasures in the vault. When the guy was leaving the cafe, his phone suddenly rang. The number was unfamiliar to the guy. Adrian picked up the phone and immediately asked who was on the other side of the call. The stranger turned out to be a very familiar Lily, who joyfully greeted the guy. The guy logically asked where she got his phone number. She said she was an instructor and had information, but it didn't matter because she wanted to invite the guy for a bite to eat, setting up a meeting place near the gym. She added that she would pay for everything herself and abruptly hung up, not leaving the guy a second to answer, but he decided to go there for the free food. At this time, the conversation between the black cat and Morris continued in the market. The merchant asked why the owner himself was at the market, to which the man calmly said that their relationship was not so bad that he could not come. Morris said that although they had met a couple of times, a simple trader could not chat casually with a market owner. The owner was called the Black Cat because of his black mask on his face, which completely depicted the grace of a cat. The important man replied that it was precisely because of this attitude of Morris towards him that he liked him. Morris ignored the cat's phrase and again tried to find out why he came to the market. The Black Cat, leaning sharply against the table, said that it was nothing serious. It was just that the merchant had submitted an anonymous bid for the auction for the first time in a long time. To which Morris, clearly expressing displeasure, said that apparently the anonymous application was not so anonymous. The man responded that the real owner of the market is not him, but his constellation, so he can receive any information. After this, he languidly extended his hand towards the merchant and asked him to show him what he had put up for auction. Morris immediately agreed, but thought it was strange that the Black Cat was the first to show interest in artifacts, even if they were from the era of destruction. The merchant very quickly took out a bag of jewels and placed it on the table in front of the market owner. The Black Cat immediately opened the bag, took out part of its contents, and began to examine everything. The man said that the item would sell for quite a large sum of money, but Morris still didn't understand what the owner was getting at. Suddenly, a system message appeared in front of the owner, saying that the constellation on the other side wanted the ring. Then, identical messages started coming in huge quantities. The Black Cat realized that his constellation incredibly wanted to get this artifact. Let's move on to the restaurant in Valhalla, where Adrian and Lilia were eating at the same table. Lily had already started her meal, and Adrian hadn't touched his food yet, and the instructor noticed this. She decided to ask the guy why he wasn't eating his order, and the guy replied that he was just wondering why there was such a place as this restaurant in Valhalla. Lily, happily trying to explain, said that in addition to the usual school cafeteria and the restaurant for the staff, there was also a regular restaurant. She was surprised that the guy did not know about it. After this, Adrian finally started eating, replying that he simply wasn't particularly interested. And so he finally decided to find out why Lilia had invited him here. After this, the woman jumped up from her seat and exclaimed a request for the student to become her assistant. Adrian said quite calmly that he simply didn't want to. But Lilia wasn't going to give in and said that if he agreed, he would receive many benefits. She said that the guy, when he went to the meeting, clearly knew what the instructor would ask, so he was obliged to listen to her. To this, the guy decided to ask what benefits he would receive for this. Then hope and sincere joy sparkled in Lilia's eyes. The first thing the guy would get is a scholarship and a lot of grants. The second is a chance to write a dissertation with Lilia. And if he publishes it, he will be able to write about the 3 types of monster attacks, after which the guy's name will be listed in the World Association for Monster Research. Lily told the guy about this with incredible and sincere delight, and the guy at that time did not show any emotion and just ate. He would also be able to leave the academy not once a month, but twice a week. After announcing all the privileges, she asked the guy the same question again. Adrian replied that it all sounded like just an inflated ego, and he still didn't want to be her assistant. He thought that if the benefits were better, he might agree. But for now, his main goal would remain to reach the eye of the Great Forest. These words upset Lilia very much. She did not know how to persuade him now and what else she could offer. Then she had an idea and proposed a simple exchange of information to Adrian. She wanted the guy to tell her about monster attacks, and in return she would tell him about what interests him. Adrian asked what information exactly they were talking about. Lilia immediately began talking about Roxy, who now often spends time in Adrian's company. Adrian said he wasn't interested and wondered if he was just helping her with her training. Were they really that close? But Lilia was not stopped by his words. She continued her story, saying that she heard that Roxy's family might soon abandon her. After Lilia ignored Adrian's words about not being interested in the topic, Adrian stood up from his seat and said he was leaving. The instructor tried to stop him, but the guy repeated that he didn't need all these benefits and information. Lily jumped up from her seat, saying that the guy should tell her at least something in exchange for this information. But Adrian said he honestly didn't care. Suddenly, the guy decided to ask another question. Why was such an infantile woman conducting the classes so harshly? She said it would be problematic if the instructor teaching about monsters taught the lessons differently. This is done because the survival of students in a real battle directly depends on these classes. Lily believes that this is the true duty of an instructor. After that, the guy simply wished Lily a good luck and headed towards the exit. The instructor tried to stop him and try to get him to tell her something in return, but the guy again said that he didn't want to do it. Let's move on to the Chojin family estate. Roxy and her older brother were already sitting in front of their father, waiting for what he would say. The father said he had gathered them here to find out their intentions before participating in the sorting test. Roxy's brother, Drake, was already a member of the True History Guild and was the leader of the attack. After passing the test, the winner will get a chance to make a contract through the Sacred Relic. This test will show who in the family is worthy of becoming the legal representative of the family. But then the head added that the loser would be kicked out of the family. Then he asked if his children agreed to participate when they had already learned the conditions. Drake immediately exclaimed the word yes, and Roxy said she would do it too. Father and brother looked sharply at Roxy. They didn't want to hear such an answer. The atmosphere around was tense. After that, the father simply added that the sorting test would take place in 3 weeks, and everyone could leave. As soon as Roxy and Drake left the room, the guy asked unkindly if Roxy hadn't gotten the hint. The girl asked again, and the guy repeated, "Didn't she notice her father's reaction when he heard her agreement to participate?" Roxy was embarrassed as she noticed and understood everything perfectly well. Drake then asked mockingly if a girl who was an illegitimate child really expected to become the head of the family. Roxy gritted her teeth. She was very angry at the rude man's words. With the same mockery, the guy added that the girl had a very scary grimace. A crazy smile appeared on the guy's face. He said that since the girl could not even receive the blessing of the constellation, then she should not even hope to win the sorting test. After which he left, saying in parting that he would make Roxy pay dearly and let her continue to spend her parents' money. As he almost closed the door behind him, sticking his eye out through the crack, he said threateningly that they would meet in 3 weeks. Roxy was left alone with her thoughts, but it was clear that she was serious. Her incentive was her mother's last wish before her death. Her mother, holding her daughter's hand for the last time, told her that she was to become the head of the Chojin family, and after achieving that goal, she would be able to do anything she wanted. Remembering this, Roxy was filled with energy and understood what her true goal was. And then the next day came. All the students were already sitting at their desks and listening to the teacher. Just as Adrian was deep in his thoughts, Barchi contacted him and said that midterm exams were coming up soon. Barchi said that if Adrian sits quietly, the constellation can also hear everything. Then he reminded again that the teacher talks about upcoming exams, but Adrian is almost always not very attentive in class. After that, Adrian decided to listen to Chris's speech. He said that the exams in Valhalla are extremely important. He said that at the end of the semester, students with the lowest scores would be expelled. Chris finished his speech by saying that there was no need to drop out of the race at the very beginning, and then Adrian thought about it. Adrian had no problems with the practical part of the exam, but he was worried about the theory. He couldn't leave school until he got into the eye of the Great Forest. Then he had an idea and turned to Barchi, asking if he had listened to all the classes. He answered yes, after which Adrian said that Barchi would decide the test for him. Adrian said he would just check Barchi's answers and tell him if anything was wrong. Barchi was outraged and said that it would not be fair since it was an exam. Then the guy angrily answered the constellation that it would be Barchi who would tell him the answers and that would be all. And then Chris said that the class was over and everyone could leave. Adrian immediately stood up and started to take his bag to leave quickly, but then someone distracted him, calling him by name behind his back. Turning around, he saw that it was Roxy. She asked if there would be training today. The guy answered positively and said that such questions make him think that the girl wants to end it. Roxy said that wasn't the case at all, so the guy asked, "What was it then?" Then, without waiting for an answer to the previous question, he asked if she wanted to learn how to use a sword. But the girl was confused by this question. Adrian assumed that since the girl was training with him, she probably didn't use a sword at all, and the girl confirmed his assumption. After that, he said that he would teach her how to hold a sword properly, even though it was not martial arts. He knew he needed to train with his sword himself. The guy then told Roxy to come to the training room near the gym. Roxy beamed with joy after these words and agreed, and so they were both there and starting training. Adrian asked when the girl last used her sword. Roxy said she hadn't touched him since they started training. The guy suggested that Roxy had been training every day before this, and the girl confirmed this again. Then the boy told the girl to draw her blade. Roxy did it without thinking. Adrian began to tell Roxy to put strength into her index finger and pinky and grip the handle firmly. The girl immediately began to try to follow the instructions. Once she did this, she noticed a significant difference between this way of holding the blade and the usual way. She didn't even put magic into the sword, but she already felt that it was safer and more stable to hold it this way than with both hands. After that, the guy ordered her to attack him using everything she had. The girl obediently agreed. She instantly got into an attack pose, and the guy didn't even move. Roxy started using mana and warned the guy that she was about to start. She quickly ran towards Adrian and immediately noticed a change in the speed of her legs. The girl quickly tried to strike the guy, but he deftly blocked it with his sword. He then said with a smirk on his face that the girl had clearly become faster. Pushing her away, he advised her not to put more magic into the feat than necessary. The girl stood up again and said she understood. She moved decisively towards the guy again. She swung her sword and struck, cutting through the air in front of her. But Adrian was able to easily dodge it, telling the girl that her move was very good. He then gave his opponent a sharp blow to her sword, causing her to lose her balance, and said that she needed to turn her body a little more when she stopped. Grinning and stretching his shoulder, the guy again said that there was no time to rest and ordered to attack. She struck him with her sword again, but Adrian easily blocked her attack with his blade. The girl tried again, striking the blade with all her might from top to bottom. But Adrian easily dodged again. The girl's sword hit the floor, leaving a deep crack in the tile. Roxy continued her attempts, thinking that she had become much stronger thanks to her training with Adrian. The training continued, Adrian was happy, and Roxy was really determined. They had been working long and hard enough that the floor around Roxy was already covered in cracks. The girl was very tired and stopped, out of breath. And Adrian wasn't tired at all. He only said that he had already been training for an hour. After these words, Roxy collapsed on the floor and began to think about how her skills had seriously improved since she entered. But looking at Adrian, who was still full of strength, she understood that she was still very far from him. At this time, the guy put away his weapon and began to warm up after training. The girl stood up resolutely and asked if Adrian would be able to spar with her again. Adrian said he didn't know yet. He thought about how sparring with her was actually useful, and that she was fun to teach since she had talent. The guy felt that she was familiar with sword art back at the ceremony, as she used a similar technique. Looking at her, he realized that if they had lived 300 years ago, she would definitely have been worthy of being his student. Noticing that the guy was thinking for a long time, Roxy repeated her question about sparring. Adrian smirked and decided to joke by saying that he didn't want to. Roxy hesitated, but replied that she understood him, to which Adrian asked why she gave in so quickly. The girl answered without hesitation that she would do whatever Adrian said. She knew that if she followed his advice, she would definitely become stronger. The guy didn't expect such an answer and said that then the training was over for today. And so, 2 weeks passed, the day of the exam arrived. All the students had already gathered at the stadium. Olivia recalled that the last time she was in this place was during the ceremony. John wondered if all the students around him were first years. He had no idea that there were actually so many of them. And Adrian didn't understand at all why they were gathered here. Then Barchi contacted him and said that his class teacher had spoken about this about 2 weeks ago. Adrian still couldn't understand anything. When suddenly the teachers appeared, Adam said that he would now tell about the midterm exams of Valhalla. He announced that this year the practical part of the exam is clearing a dungeon. The space around the students began to change dramatically, and Adam continued to speak. He said that the students would split into teams and go to an artificial dungeon. The instructor added that students can divide themselves into teams, adding that there should be about 8 people in a team, but everyone has the right to decide whether to make the team larger or smaller. Teachers will only evaluate the students' contribution to clearing the dungeon and the criteria for disqualification, all given 5 hours. Adam then said that whoever fails to complete the test within the allotted time will be considered as having failed the exam. After his speech, he suddenly shouted that the exam was starting. The teachers watched closely as the students divided into teams. Chris told Adam that, as expected, the students panicked. At this time, Olivia was already gathering her team. She was calling people, since there weren't enough of them in her team. She understood that she shouldn't choose someone who is better than her, because 5 hours is quite enough for a dungeon of this level. And the main thing is to prove yourself when passing the dungeon. And so she found the required number of people and said that it was time for them to start the passage. Adam expected that the students from the 5 major families would quickly understand the principle of this exam. And that is what happened. But students from ordinary families go in a team of 20 people, but still, most often in a group of 8 students. They also had conflicts, as the team could become unbalanced. After finishing his thoughts, Adam told Chris that they needed to get ready to evaluate the students, since in about 30 minutes, everyone would be entering the dungeon. At this time, Adrian noticed how the teachers immediately began to write something in their notebooks as soon as someone entered the dungeon, and he realized that they began to evaluate immediately. Turning back, the guy saw Roxy, who was standing alone and probably not included in any of the teams. Adrian decided to approach her. He asked if she had joined any team, to which the girl answered no. Then the guy said that almost everyone had already entered the dungeon. What was the girl going to do? She replied that she would do whatever Adrian told her. These words stunned the guy. He clearly didn't expect to hear that. The guy laughed in his thoughts at the fact that after their last training, the girl followed his words like a sword. He then told her that he would go to the test alone, after which he turned around and began to walk away. Roxy asked if she should go alone too, or join one of the teams, to which the guy replied that she should do as she wants. But he thought the exam wouldn't be difficult. He headed towards the entrance to the dungeon, and the girl began to think about what she should do. And then one guy who was already on one of the teams noticed her. He approached her and asked if she was the same Roxy. The girl had already made her decision at that moment. The guy said that if she hadn't found a team yet, she could join them, and all his teammates smiled amiably after these words. But Roxy simply apologized to this proposal and resolutely said that she would go alone. She then walked towards the entrance to the dungeon and began to open the door, but the guy tried to stop her, saying that she could be disqualified if she couldn't, to which Roxy replied that she could handle it, especially since Adrian said it wouldn't be difficult. The guy was afraid for the girl and once again tried to reason with her, shouting for her to stop and not do this. But Roxy was determined and simply closed the door, ignoring the guy's words. In the observation room, all the teachers were keeping a close eye on all the students. Some groups had already encountered monsters, and attention was paid to those even more. Students were assessed quickly. Most of them did not receive more than 3 points. Chris watched as Adam quickly assessed the students. He knew that the instructor always assessed everyone quickly and without mistakes. When Adam was still a soldier, he was called a clean master, as he is a legendary contractor with a 99% dungeon clearance rate. Chris respected teacher Adam because he understands the basics of clearing better than anyone else, and that is how he evaluates students. Adam, meanwhile, watching the students, thought that this year was quite good. He noted that members of 5 families stood out in particular, but among them, the most outstanding is Olivia. She was able to skillfully coordinate the actions of her team, assessing everyone's abilities with great accuracy and issuing commands. There was a moment when their team was attacked by a large orc, but thanks to Olivia's command that the sword-wielding students should take action, they easily blocked the attack. Olivia also did a great job of maintaining team spirit, encouraging everyone. She gave commands to the archers at the right moment. Thanks to this, they were able to stop the monster a little. At that moment, Olivia herself struck the orc, jumping out of the crowd. This plan helped this team pass the test and destroy the monsters with ease. Adam admired the way she gave commands and acted with precision and skill. He understood that despite the fact that she spent most of her time giving commands, she herself participated in such a way as to get points. Adam thought that if Olivia was already showing such results in midterm exams, then reaching the top was just a matter of time for her. He remembered the qualifying tests and thought that if Adrian hadn't won back then, Olivia's reputation would have been untarnished. At that moment, he wanted to watch the guy too. He went into search and entered his name. But the program showed that this student was not found. Adam knew that this could not be, since the system was working properly. And at that moment, a shocking thought came to him, the truth of which he did not want to believe. He decided to check the list of people who had already completed the exam, and Adrian was already on that list. Instructor Adam was very shocked. He could not understand how a first-year student passed this test alone in only 23 minutes. Even though Adrian had shown an incredible result at the qualifying round, Adam still couldn't believe that a 17-year-old boy was capable of such a thing. Then the instructor decided to watch the recording of the test. The video showed a huge crowd of goblins and orcs attacking the guy at the same time. Adrian was completely relaxed and simply began to massage his shoulder. And then, after a couple of seconds, he suddenly started running towards the crowd. The monsters also did not stop moving towards the guy. Instantly approaching the crowd, Adrian swung his sword straight at the crowd, his eyes flashing with madness. He struck and hit several goblins at once. At that moment, one monster was crawling along the ceiling and approaching Adrian in the hope that he would not notice it. But for Adrian, this was nonsense. With the next blow, he cut the goblin's head open. After that, his face seemed to take on an incredibly calm look. Immediately after all the monsters were destroyed, two huge orcs appeared in front of the guy. They immediately tried to hit the guy at the same time, swinging and hitting with large bats. But the blow was made on the floor, which even cracked after the blows. At this time, Adrian, who was able to dodge the blow very easily, had already jumped on the monsters from behind, swinging his sword. Again, with one blow he destroyed these two thugs. The guy killed all the monsters in his path without getting tired. The teachers watching all this were simply in incredible shock. And then the last round came. A huge metal golem appeared in front of Adrian. Adam knew that this was a special golem, designed specifically for the exams, and it was designed just right for the strength of 8 people. The golem suddenly tried to hit the guy with its huge hand, but the guy just grinned and was already preparing to strike with his blade. He channeled all his magic into his sword and delivered an incredibly powerful blow straight into the golem's body. The monster was immediately defeated and began to disappear. At this point, the exam was over for Adrian. Adam realized that first place rightfully went to this guy. After some time, other teams began to emerge from the dungeon, having completed the exam. Some students were depressed and tired, while others emerged from the test with enthusiasm. Roxy had also long since finished her midterm exam dungeon. And so, some time passed, and already in the teacher's room, Chris began to look at the lists of those who had passed. He was shocked when he saw the results. The teacher spoke to Adam, saying that, as expected, Adrian was in first place. The instructor replied that it was indeed obvious. Everyone knew this guy would come in first place, but no one expected him to be able to pass the test so quickly and on his own. Adam said that if Adrian grows up and comes into the industry, Korea could have a title called One Again. Chris asked Adam if he understood for sure that this title was the title of the strongest contractor in the world, to which the instructor answered positively. The instructor came out of his thoughts and said that most likely such thoughts came to his mind because they had not had any geniuses for a long time. After discussing Adrian, Chris said that it was also a big surprise that Roxy came in second. Adam didn't know what happened, but he was surprised that the girl went to take the exam alone, like Adrian. The girl also coped with the test quite quickly, although she received many injuries. The instructor said he knew Roxy was very hardworking, but he didn't think she would go into the dungeon alone. Adam then pointed out that if this exam had been based on teamwork, Olivia would have definitely gotten the highest score. Despite Adrian and Roxy's high results, when the lists come out, Adam would be reluctant to advise others to follow their example, as ordinary students will not be able to replicate it. Chris completely agreed with Adam's opinion. The teacher recalled that when he worked at the Chojin Guild, he definitely didn't notice anything special about the girl. She just practiced a lot and diligently. After that, the thought came to his mind that Roxy decided to go to the dungeon alone because of Adrian. But he quickly discarded this assumption, as it seemed like nonsense to him. And so the next day, in Valhalla, they posted the lists of those who had taken the exam, and a crowd of students immediately ran to the stand to find out what score they had received. Bob Ventrick was also looking at the lists with Alice, and when he saw that Adrian was in first place, he became very angry. He asked the girl if Larry was already in Korea. The girl answered yes. Then the guy's eyes flashed with rage, and he ordered the girl to immediately call Larry and get ready to leave. And so they arrived at the meeting place with Larry. As soon as they entered the building, Bob was immediately stopped by Larry, who greeted him. The guy said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Bob and Larry sat down at the table, with Alice standing behind them, and Larry immediately attacked the food with a huge appetite. But at some point he stopped eating and, with his mouth full, asked Bob who this Adrian was that needed to be dealt with. Bob smirked and replied that Adrian was just a dumb freshman from the orphanage, but he had seriously embarrassed Bob and needed to be paid back. Larry listened attentively, continuing to stuff his mouth with meat. Then he asked abruptly if he could kill this Adrian. Bob said he was leaving it up to Larry to decide. Larry said that things are not as simple now as they used to be, and he needs to prepare the stage carefully. He then pointed his finger at the frightened Alice and said that last time, because of this girl, with whom he was then dealing, he had to fight with the Palace family. He then added that due to the rapidly spreading rumors, he had to kill a couple more people. Alice at this moment listened to all this and was incredibly scared. After he said this, he continued eating, saying that it was always very difficult to enter Valhalla. To all this, Bob replied that he would do everything in his power to set the stage. Larry laughed and said he expected a good reward for this. And so, a week passed. Adrian again carried the application to leave school this weekend. At some point, Barchi contacted him, asking if it was true that he was resigning again, and the guy replied yes. Barchi logically asked why he was bringing the statement again if he had already come out this week, and Adrian replied that there were nuances here. Adrian said that he heard that if you do well on your midterms or finals, you will be allowed to leave Valhalla again. The guy was determined to find his remaining notes? Barchi asked where exactly the guy was heading. And then the weekend came. The guy went to Suwon. He walked forward along the path, looking at his phone. He looked at his phone, looking for the route, and finally found it. The guy was suddenly distracted by the voice of the man who was standing right in front of him. The guy looked up and saw a big guy named Larry standing in front of him. Around this time, at the market where Adrian sold his jewelry, a black cat was watching everything that was happening from the window of his skyscraper. He just stood there and did nothing but spy. But suddenly his calm was broken by a message from the system, which said that the constellation on the other side was asking when the ring would arrive. The man replied that it would be here soon, that it was already going through standard procedures and would arrive through the portal. Suddenly, something began to happen that the black cat did not expect. Identical messages began to arrive in the system without stopping in large quantities. The man saw such behavior from the constellation for the first time. While he was thinking, something began to appear in the portal. The owner quickly approached the portal and began to examine what had just arrived. Opening the box, he saw that it was the very ring that had caused all the fuss. The black horse was very happy that the ring had finally arrived. He hoped that the constellation would calm down when it received the ring. At that very second, he called the constellation. A message quickly appeared from the system, saying that the constellation was here. Let's get back to what's going on between Adrian and Larry. As soon as Larry stopped Adrian on the road, Adrian immediately asked who was standing in front of him. Larry just laughed at this and asked Adrian if he really needed to know this. Adrian said quite calmly that he assumed Larry wanted something from him. Larry said the guy was smart, so why else would he meet him on a remote mountain peak? Adrian asked. Did Larry come here to get rid of the guy? To which he grinned and said once again that Adrian was insightful. Adrian had already taken off his briefcase and started to throw it on the ground, saying that it was not a matter of insight at all. He added that anyone would have guessed this if they had seen Larry. Then he said that he realized this a couple of days ago. Larry was already at the limit of rage. He called the guy very rudely and prepared to attack. He gathered his strength into a fist, jumped, and swung at the guy. Adrian, as usual, dodged the attack with ease. This caused Larry's fist to hit the tree trunk straight. The tree cracked from such a strong blow. Soon the tree fell down completely. Adrian watched all this calmly, and this made Larry smile. Larry said the guy was very lucky, and the guy said it had nothing to do with it, it was just a very slow hit. But this blow made Adrian think. He realized that Larry was very strong and reminded him of John. He understood that with such a fragile body as his now, it was better not to get hit by such blows. After that, he smiled and decided that the strategy for this fight would be very simple. The guy just turned around and started running. Larry was surprised. But a second later, Larry laughed and ran after the guy. Larry thought that in this situation, running was actually a good choice because if you didn't run away, you would be beaten to death. Larry then swung his fist at the guy and shouted that he would not let him go. But at that very moment, he stopped because Adrian's fist was already right in front of his face. Until the fist was so close, the guy didn't even notice that Adrian was approaching. He was shocked. And then Adrian delivered an incredibly strong punch to the guy's face, and Larry flew back a long distance. After a hard fall, lying on the ground, Larry opened his eyes and saw that another attack from Adrian was approaching. Adrian had a crazy look on his face and raised his leg right above the guy's face, ready to strike. And so he tried to step sharply on the guy. But Larry, although he had not yet recovered from the previous blow, deftly dodged the blow at the last second. The kick was delivered to the ground, exactly where Larry's head had been lying a moment ago. Larry moved from a lying position to a sitting position. He looked at the place where Adrian's foot landed. He was shocked to see that the ground from his impact had formed a hole and cracked. Adrian, mocking Larry, said that Larry was just lucky to dodge it. Larry didn't like these words at all. He started to bare his teeth. Larry stood up, then he asked Adrian what he did. Adrian smirked and said that he was the best in Valhalla, and it would be useful for Larry to know that. This made Larry even more angry. He wondered what the guy had been injecting himself with to become so strong. Let's fast forward to Larry's childhood, which took place in the Ventric family home. Larry's parents used his talent to raise their status a little. They forced him to drink a huge amount of different elixirs, since his talent is an innate affinity for elixirs. Larry drank everything his relatives gave him over and over again. They bought him elixirs that cost hundreds of millions. By the age of 16, the boy had become stronger than an adult. His parents wanted to use him to gain recognition for their family, but none of them expected that Larry would go against their system because he would not want to spend his whole life under control, and this happened. He dealt cruelly with his own mother. Larry then brutally killed his father. Larry thought that his strength was unrivaled. So why should he worry about his family's recognition? When Kayla learned about this incident, she was furious. But after calming down, she made the right decision for herself. Larry was then banished from the Ventrick family. But the guy didn't care about it. He started carrying out orders for murders, and after that, he had good money. After breaking up with his family, he even became stronger. When Bob Ventrick placed the order and offered a huge sum, Larry's interest in Adrian was not limited to money. He became genuinely interested in Adrian. Adrian attracted such widespread interest because he took first place in the Valhalla qualifiers, and also because he sent all the guild representatives to hell. Larry just wanted to amuse himself by playing with Adrian for a bit. But something went wrong in Larry's plan. He didn't understand. And in the end, he was the one who got beaten up. Larry couldn't figure out who this guy was. Wiping the blood from his face, Larry asked Adrian what he had been taking to become so strong. He added that he doubted there were any elixirs that were so cheap that an orphan like Adrian could afford them. To which Adrian simply said the word "what?" Then Adrian laughed really hard at this, which left Larry stunned. After calming down his laughter a little and brushing the tears of laughter from his face, Adrian asked if Larry meant steroids. Then Adrian said that Larry was just a crook who pumped himself full of some crap, which made Larry angry. Larry asked if the guy meant to say that he became so strong without the help of elixirs. Afterwards, Adrian rolled up his sleeves and told Larry that he had become strong through hard training and exercise. Adrian also said that he can compare Larry to John, but he believes that comparing a natural-born strongman and someone like Larry is not worth it. These words made Larry even more angry. He began to shake with rage. Then Larry grabbed the hilt of his blade. Adrian watched this completely calmly. Larry began to pour magic into the blade, and himself, he was already standing in a pose indicating readiness for battle. Adrian was confused by the guy's aura. He wondered if it was really magical power. Larry felt himself getting stronger with every passing second, and his eyes flashed with rage. Before Larry could finish his speech, he raised his head and saw Adrian flying towards him with another blow. Adrian's knee landed squarely on the side of Larry's jaw. This incredibly powerful blow sent Larry flying back quite a distance. Larry would have flown further, but he crashed into a tree with his back, at which time Adrian said that only very stupid people would wait until their opponent was preparing to attack. Without wasting a second, Adrian was already swinging his fist to deliver another punch to the guy's face. Larry didn't have time to dodge, and this strong punch flew straight into his face, from which the tree he had crashed into earlier broke. Adrian grabbed the guy by the hair and lifted him up a little, ignoring Larry's requests, and stopped. Adrian squatted down next to Larry, still holding him by the hair. He said that the guy shouldn't pass out yet, called him an idiot swallowing elixirs. The guy grinned and added that he would have forgiven the offender if he had just wanted to fight him. But Larry said that he wanted to get rid of him. Shaking his fist, Adrian said he wanted to ask something. Larry tried to say something but was instantly cut off by a punch to the face from Adrian, whose face took on a mad look. Let's move to the Valhalla dorms, and more specifically to Bob Ventrick's room. Bob sat on his couch thinking that Larry had probably dealt with Adrian by now, a thought that made Bob very happy. He also, knowing Larry's character, was sure that he would not only beat Adrian, but also kill him. But it would still be difficult to clean up after him. It's good that it didn't happen at school. Then Bob, with a joyful smile on his face, called Alice and ordered her to order him a car. And finally, Bob's phone started vibrating. It was Larry calling. Bob was in anticipation of good news. Bob picked up the phone and immediately asked if Larry had dealt with Adrian yet. He heard nothing in response, began to worry and try to call Larry to the phone. But then he heard Larry making terrible wheezing sounds and unable to say anything, which scared Bob. Then he heard a voice that suggested Bob didn't understand what was happening. It turned out that the voice belonged to Adrian. Bob immediately recognized it when he heard it. Then Larry's wheezing could be heard again, to which Adrian said that he would now try to translate what the beaten man was saying. Adrian then mockingly said that Larry was asking for 2 candles to be lit for him if he died. Then Adrian told Bob to wait for him. Ventrick was incredibly scared after what Adrian said. He took it as a threat. In response, Adrian did not hear anything from Bob. He asked if Ventrick could hear him, but after these words he heard a dial tone on the phone. It was Bob hanging up, ending the conversation. Adrian laughed and said that it was very rude to hang up right away and called Bob a bastard. Having finished talking with Ventrick, Adrian stood up and began to think about what he should do with this beaten guy. At this point, Bob Ventrick was sitting nervously on his couch, wondering what had just happened and what to do next. And Alice brought him some hot tea. Coming closer to Bob, she repeated again that the tea was ready, but Ventrick did not answer this time either. But after repeating her words again, Alice heard Bob start shouting, telling the girl to shut her mouth. The girl listened to Bob, said okay and left. This situation makes Bob even more angry. Bob sat there repeating Adrian's name over and over again, completely confused as to why his plan had failed. He sat and thought about how he couldn't even imagine such an outcome of events. He didn't know what to do next and how to finally deal with Adrian. Bob realized that the guy was behind all this. He began to blame Larry for everything that happened. Then Bob realized that this situation would definitely reach the Ventric family. It was only a matter of time, he was afraid, because everything got out of control that day. But at that very second, a brilliant idea came into his head. He realized that everything might not be so bad yet. Bob figured that since the guy was an orphan from the bottom, there was no way he could contact his family, and they certainly didn't find out anything. But Bob still decided that it would be better to lie low and just keep an eye on Adrian for now. Let's return to Adrian, who was already walking along the forest path, leaving Larry in proud solitude. At that moment, Barchi contacted him and asked if the guy had forgotten his sword, even though it was stupid. Adrian replied that he would post the video when no one would expect it. Barchi listened attentively and decided to ask why he didn't just kill then. Adrian replied that in his past life, 300 years ago, he would have done exactly that. But now it might be a problem, since he was an ordinary student. Barchi suddenly remembered what he wanted to say and said that he was worried about something. He said he was worried specifically about the magic Larry had tried to use. This magic was surprisingly very familiar to Barchi. He told Adrian about it. The guy, of course, asked Barchi about it right away, but he said that if he had released more magic, Barchi would have been able to tell for sure. But he was sure that he was familiar with such magic. Barchi asked Adrian if he felt anything. The guy remembered that 300 years ago, monsters sacrificed cows and dogs to use such black magic, and Barchi responded that Adrian was not very good at judging people by their magic. The guy got angry at this and ordered Barchi to shut up. Then, Adrian suggested that the other side of the blade that guy Larry was talking about was connected to that power. Barchi said that was quite possible. After Adrian and Larry's fight, when Larry was already beaten, Adrian asked who sent the guy to attack him. But Larry couldn't speak because of his broken jaw. He let out a growl. After this, Adrian realized that he had knocked the guy's jaw out, and at this rate he wouldn't get an answer. Then he quickly grabbed Larry by the jaw and put it back in with a deft movement of his hands. Larry then touched his jaw with his hand and realized that he could speak. Adrian repeated his question again. Larry didn't even know if he should answer it. Receiving no answer, Adrian sighed deeply. He squatted down in front of Larry, took his hand and said that he had put his jaw back in so that he would answer his questions. Adrian's eyes flashed with anger again, and he told the guy that silence was clearly not the best solution in this situation. Larry didn't understand what Adrian wanted to do. He asked him in fear why he was holding his fingers. Immediately after this question, Adrian, with a smirk on his face, sharply pulled the guy's hand. Larry started screaming loudly. His finger had just been broken. Adrian told the guy to speak faster before he broke the rest of his fingers. Larry thought about it, grinned, and replied that Bob Ventric hired him. Adrian thought he wondered if Bob had gotten to him last time or not. Then Adrian, saying that the guy didn't look like a Valhalla student, asked more questions about who Larry himself was and where he worked. Larry chuckled, saying that Adrian would certainly not be satisfied with such an answer, but he himself would sooner or later find out the answers to these questions. Quite calmly, Adrian threatened to break Larry's second finger as well. After that, the smile disappeared from Larry's face. He fearfully replied that he was Larry from the first kind of the Ventric family, who carries out orders as a hired hand. Adrian thought he had heard that answer somewhere before, and he asked Larry mockingly if he enjoyed being a mercenary or just a paid hooligan. Larry, without answering this, asked Adrian a counter question, calling him just a lucky guy. Are all people trash in the guy's eyes? Without waiting for an answer, Larry immediately said that the constellation that the first species works with is the other side of the blade. But of course, Larry also has a contract with it. Feeling more confident, Larry said that if he had managed to charge his magic, the outcome of the fight could have been completely different. Adrian laughed and said that if Larry had shut up after answering the questions, the guy would have left him just like that. But Larry believed in himself too much. Adrian grabbed Larry's jaw again, but this time to knock it back, and then he walked away. And so, on his way back home, Adrian was looking for information about this group of mercenaries. Everyone said that they were very evil. Adrian was upset that he still couldn't find his notes, and Bob still wouldn't leave him alone. Adrian thought about how he could deal with this Ventric. He realized that he needed to use technology. Even during the conversation with Larry, he managed to turn on the dictaphone and record everything. Then Adrian began to think about where to upload all these records. He decided to call Lilia. She clearly did not expect a call. She picked up the phone instantly, her eyes lit up with hope. She asked if Adrian was calling her because he had finally decided to become her assistant. Adrian replied that it was not that. He wanted to know if Lilia knew any journalists. The very next day, all the newspapers carried the news that a former member of the Ventrick family had attacked a freshman on orders from Bob Ventrick, but the student was able to fight back. Reading this, Adrian said that this is what he calls modern war. Barchi told him that for a man who lived 300 years ago, Adrian had somehow become too accustomed to modern technology. Adrian replied that after reincarnation it was difficult for him at first, but he mostly scrolled through social networks and watched the news, and this helped him. Reading all the news about yesterday, Adrian realized that he wanted to take revenge only on Bob, but it turned out that he had screwed the entire Ventrick family. Then, Adrian thought about the fact that the reporter that Lilia introduced him to turned out to be an important person. Adrian did not think that this story would take such a turn. And then he came across a video with an address from the head of the Ventrick family. In this appeal, Kayla said that she offered her deepest apologies to the attacked student and the entire Valhalla Academy. She then said that the attack was carried out by Larry, who had already been expelled from the Ventrick family. Larry himself also later said that the statement that Bob Ventrick was the customer was false, and that by initially slandering Bob, Larry was simply trying to get out of the situation. Because of this, they believed that the Ventrick family was not involved in the incident. But the attack was carried out by a former member of the Ventrick family, so they can't just ignore what happened. Kayla said that as the head of the Ventrick family, she would personally visit the victim and apologize to him. She went on to say that even if Bob was not involved in the attack, they believed he was still connected to the attacker. They brought him home to conduct an internal investigation into the Ventrick family. They will try their best to eliminate all unnecessary suspicions. After these words, she bowed to everyone as a sign of respect and left. As she was leaving, all the reporters were shouting and asking questions, trying to stop Kayla, but she didn't even look at them. Bob himself also saw this official appeal. He was incredibly scared by what he heard. He continued to stare at the phone, and suddenly his father called him. Bob picked up the phone and greeted him. Father told Bob that he had to return to England for a while. It was a family order. Bob agreed, although this scared him even more. Bob was very angry at what was happening. He began to squeeze the phone. Trembling went through his body. Alice, standing nearby, simply looked down at the floor and did not move. And then the next day came. Adrian watched the video of Larry being taken away by law enforcement and reporters asking questions. In this video, Larry was saying that the Ventrick family is right, and he is the only one who stands behind the attack. Adrian was surprised that Larry swallowed his pride so quickly. The Ventrick family really pissed Adrian off. As he walked to class, he thought that meeting the head of the Ventrick family and her apology would be very awkward, and just thinking about it made Adrian feel sick. Soon he remembered about Lilia's help. He decided to invite her to a cafe. When they met there, Lilia's eyes sparkled with joy again, and Adrian just calmly drank his drink and, noticing how Lilia was looking at him, said no. Lily jumped up from her seat and asked how the guy knew what she wanted to ask, and Adrian replied that it was obvious. Then Lilia, pretending to be offended, asked why Adrian had called her then. Without waiting for the guy's answer, she jumped up from her seat again and exclaimed questioningly that maybe this was a date, and Adrian told her to wake up. Lily asked when they had managed to switch to the informal you. Adrian replied that they had been communicating like this for a long time. He went on to say that he had not called her because he was bored, but because he wanted to thank her for introducing him to the journalist. He said that he would give her some information about fighting monsters. Lilia couldn't believe her ears. She was incredibly happy. The guy then said he would tell her more if she helped him leave school this weekend. Lilia said it would be easy as pie. She added that if he became her assistant, he would be able to leave school every day, but the guy refused again. Let's move to the northern part of the Pacific Ocean, where a ship was already sailing, carrying prisoners. Larry was one of them, sitting in a holding cell with his hands cuffed behind his back. Larry was angry. He didn't think he would be put on a ship and transported as cargo. He thought he might be being taken to a prison tower in the North Pacific Ocean. Once upon a time, the S-rank constellation independently created this shelter of deprivation, this prison that turns contractors into ordinary people. But he quickly came to the conclusion that none of this mattered. He thought he just needed to shut up and sit still so that Bob could remain in the Ventrick family. And if he does this, his sentence will be reduced to 5 years. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice from behind calling Larry an ugly face. Larry immediately turned his head towards the sound, and at that very moment his throat was cut with one movement of the hand. The guy screamed and started coughing up blood. The man who did this continued to stand next to him and look at Larry. Then he told Larry to die, calling him a fool, adding that the first species did not need such people. After these words, Larry immediately fell face down on the floor and died. The man looked at the boy's lifeless body for a while and left. Let's move on to the Ventrick family estate. At this time, Kayla met Bob and his father with a displeased face. Bob and his father entered Kayla's office and bowed in respect. Kayla said the guy's name menacingly. Bob was very scared and sweat started pouring down his face. Kayla asked Bob what he was going to do now, to which the guy simply said he was sorry. To this, the girl said that a simple apology would not fix the situation. This made the guy even more tense. He was afraid to even breathe. Kayla then asked the boy to tell her what exactly made him do something so evil. Not receiving a clear answer, she asked if he wanted to deal with Adrian. Bob answered positively. Kayla was angry that the guy didn't tell her anything himself, and she had to ask a lot of leading questions herself. She stood up from her seat, saying that the boy had thought that Adrian had hurt the pride of the Ventrick family. But in fact, it was only Bob's own pride that had been hurt. Getting close enough to Bob, she said that he was the one who dragged the Ventrick family name through the mud. She leaned over Bob and asked menacingly what they should do now. Bob fell to his knees and said he would do anything to restore their family's honor. Kayla straightened up and said the guy was talking bird. The only way to restore his reputation was to expel Bob from the family. And hearing this, the boy became even more frightened. Then Bob's father intervened in the conversation and told the chief that this would be too cruel. To this, the head said that then she could kick out Bob's father too. After this, the man himself became scared. The head mistress said arrogantly that she would kill or kick Bob out of the family right now. But she knew that then everyone would know for sure that Bob was the one who hired Larry and tried to kill the student. She said Bob's name again, and he responded obediently. Kayla said that she wasn't kicking him out yet. She ordered him to return to Valhalla and keep his mouth shut there. The leader was going to think about what happened again when she met Adrian. Bob bowed to Kayla again and thanked her. Before Bob and his father left, Kayla told the man to keep a better eye on his son, as his punishment would depend on his son's actions. And so they left the office of Chief Kayla Ventrick. Bob and his father were walking down the hallway, very angry about what was happening. The father decided to start the conversation by telling Bob to keep a low profile and not do anything rash. To this, Bob asked, hadn't his father heard what the chief had told them? Then, without waiting for an answer, Bob said that sooner or later, he would be kicked out anyway when everything calmed down. But before that, he had to do something, because now nothing could stop him. Then he said that his father would have to help him, and his father looked at his son in silence, not knowing what to answer. After a couple of seconds, the father finally answered, saying that the main thing was that no one found out. Bob agreed with this. And now, several days have passed since the recent events. Adrian and teacher Chris were already sitting in the interrogation room. The teacher said that the head of the Ventrick family would arrive soon to apologize to the guy. Adrian said that they had nothing in common. She even publicly stated in an official announcement that the incident had nothing to do with the Ventrick family. Chris replied that it was still her moral duty to apologize to the guy. She had come all the way to Korea for this. Adrian thought that the leader would come here because she had no other choice, and so she wanted to take Bob's punishment upon herself. Thinking about it, Adrian realized that all this was terribly irritating to him. His face expressed displeasure. Chris said he and the other instructors were also upset about it. Chris tried to reason everything out. First, they attacked a Valhalla student. Then the attacker admitted that he was hired by Bob Ventrick, but then they denied everything he said. The teacher said he couldn't believe they were downplaying Adrian's recorded confession simply to protect the family and hide the truth. He added that Bob or the head of the family should be punished anyway, but their family had recently donated a large sum of money to the school. Chris just couldn't believe that Valhalla's budget was made up of donations from large families, and if they gave enough money, the school would most likely turn a blind eye. Adrian was completely calm. He said that if that was the case, then he should talk to the head of the Ventrick family. Chris was very surprised that Adrian had such a calm reaction. And finally, there was a knock on the door. Chris whispered that the boss was here, and he would open the door now to let her in. He stood up, wished the guy a pleasant conversation, and went to the door. The teacher opened the door slightly, and Kayla's haughty grin was already visible through the crack. When the door opened fully, Chris met the lady and bowed to her as a sign of respect. He decided not to detain anyone and left the room, telling them not to hurry. The girl thanked him for his hospitality. And so Chris left, closing the door behind him, and the head of the family was already heading towards Adrian and stood opposite him. She greeted the guy, saying that she was pleased to meet him. She informed him that she was the head of their family. Adrian replied that he was also very pleased to meet you. After these words, Kayla majestically sat down on the sofa opposite Adrian. Adrian relaxed a little after that. And so she began her speech talking about what happened because of Larry. She bowed her head deeply and apologized profusely to the guy. Adrian said that since Larry had already been banished, everything was fine. Kayla continued by saying that she heard that the Ventric family was giving Adrian a hard time even at school. The boy replied that it was only that one time, so it didn't matter now. Adrian said that he had nothing to say since the official statement from the head said that the incident had nothing to do with their family. Kayla listened to this silently. Kayla said that in this situation, neither the forces nor ordinary citizens trust them. Adrian scratched his ear and said that this was exactly the case, but he himself knew that it was all a lie. After that, Kayla smirked and told the guy that she wanted to resolve the misunderstandings between them. She asked if Adrian would help her. The guy, without thinking, answered that he wouldn't do it. But Kayla said that she knew Adrian would answer that way. She said that if the guy helps them now, she will give him full support until graduation. She then added that she could recommend the boy to a guild that the Ventric family sponsored, so they could continue to support him after he graduated. She would also help Adrian become a hunter in Korea so he wouldn't have any difficulties. Adrian smirked as he listened to this. Adrian, after waiting for Kayla to finish her speech, mockingly said that no one expected that she would try so hard to drag him out. He assumed that the leader was in despair. Kayla, hearing this, was no longer so friendly. Her face changed dramatically. The guy then went on to say that it really pissed him off that Kayla and the entire Ventric family were pretending like nothing had happened. So why would the guy play along? Adrian then added that he didn't want a reward. His only wish was to see the Ventric family live with the shame that Bob caused. These words made Kayla incredibly angry. Her face took on a furious look. She called the guy trash. The magic of the head of the family began to come out so strongly that her hair even stood up. She asked if the guy even knew who he was talking to now. Adrian chuckled and said that apparently the girl had finally decided to show her true face, and it must have been difficult for her to contain it. Kayla was not going to calm down. She continued to menacingly say that she came to this dump called school to make it easier to convince Adrian, and he dares to behave so arrogantly. Her eyes flashed with rage and she said that she just needed to kill Adrian here and now. She said that she wanted to be generous and give the guy a good chance, but he just refused it. Adrian listened to all this with a satisfied look. When threatened with murder, the boy mockingly told Kayla to give it a try. The head of the Ventric family did not expect such calmness from Adrian. She asked the guy again, "What was he saying?" Adrian raised his head proudly and asked, "Didn't the girl say that the Ventric family had nothing to do with the attack? But then why, in order to reinforce this lie, did she decide to spend a huge amount of money on him, and now she even wants to kill him?" Adrian then said that he thought that was all Kayla could do, and the girl listened to this and became angrier with every word he said. There was no response from the girl. Adrian, continuing to be in a completely relaxed state, said that if she attacked him, she still would not be able to kill her. The head of the family's magic was still leaking out, and his hair was raised up during the entire conversation. But suddenly the girl returned to a completely calm appearance, calmed her magic, and her hair fell back to its previous state. Kayla quickly walked to the exit, opened the door, and before leaving, told the guy that he would regret this. Adrian smirked again and said that she couldn't do anything after all and was just chatting away. At this point, Barchi contacted the guy. He said that he did not want to interfere, but decided to ask if the guy really had to do this. Adrian replied that the creatures who think that everyone should fall at their feet are what irritate him the most. His eyes flashed with anger again as he said he knew what Kayla was going to do, calling her trash who was trying to put everyone on a chain. Then Adrian said that this is why he also hates Barky. The constellation was taken aback by such an answer. Right after that, Adrian stood up and went to the exit. He thought that since there were no more lessons today, he could go to the training room a little earlier. And now he was approaching the hall where he was supposed to have training with Roxy. Looking up from his phone, Adrian saw Roxy talking to some guy. He decided to take a closer look at that guy, thinking that maybe it was someone he knew, but he still couldn't figure out who it was. As Adrian got closer, he heard the guy telling Roxy that she wouldn't be able to win the competition. He said that no matter how much Roxy trained, it still wouldn't help her against him. The guy then extended his hand towards Roxy, saying that if she wanted to stay in the family, she just needed to not be a whimsical person. He waited for the girl to answer and added that he didn't want to humiliate her. Roxy listened to all this with a very disappointed look. But suddenly the girl said no to this proposal from Roxy's older brother. The brother was very surprised at what was happening. He assumed a more confident stance, saying that he was giving the girl one last chance. So why did she refuse so easily? And so Roxy finally decided to answer the guy, gathering her strength. But as soon as she started to speak, she was interrupted by a voice that said that it was the guy himself who did not understand something, since he was an idiot. The brother couldn't believe that he was being contradicted. He exclaimed, "Who is calling him an idiot?" And suddenly Adrian appeared from behind Roxy, pointing his finger at the offender. He said that he was the idiot, because he did not leave the person alone, who worked very hard. The girl's brother's face changed and he asked why Adrian was calling him names if he didn't even know who he was talking to. Adrian noted that today, he sees too many people bragging about their status, and Adrian doesn't care at all who stands in front of him. The guy confidently told the guy not to dare bother students within the school anymore, and if he had finished his speech, then he should get lost. Then he asked Roxy if she agreed with him. Roxy immediately began nodding her head up and down in agreement. Then Roxy's brother could no longer object. He threateningly told Roxy that they would meet at the test. Immediately after that, the guy left and the two looked after him. Roxy immediately thanked Adrian, to which he told her that it was nothing special and suggested that she start training faster. But Roxy wanted to continue the conversation and said that when she agreed in the conversation, she would actually have said something different. Then Adrian asked what she had answered. She said she wouldn't tell him to get lost, she would just tell him who his mother was. But before she could finish, Adrian stopped her. As they walked towards the gym for training, they discussed that they would work hard today, since both would not be able to meet at the next training session. Fast forward to what's happening in Shinhyun, near the hills a week later. Adrian was already walking along the path among the trees with a shovel on his back, looking for the place where her notes were buried. On the way, Barchi contacted him and asked the guy if he was going to look for his notes. Adrian answered yes. Barchi asked why he needed this, if he had already found enough relics and stones in his old notes last time. The guy replied that he wanted to know how many were left. Adrian said that he thought that if he kept looking, he would find something incredible there. Barchi asked again what exactly the guy meant. The guy replied that if he found something like that, he would be able to overcome the shortcomings that he had 300 years ago. Then, turning to Barchi, the guy said that if he had found him earlier than 300 years ago, maybe he would not have killed him. At this time, reporters had already gathered near the Chojin family estate. They were heatedly discussing this family's selection day today. Rocky and her brother Drake were already standing in front of their father, waiting for the competition to begin. And then the father finally announced the start of the test, saying that he would now tell the rules. Looking at Drake, he said that, as he had already said, whoever passed the test would be considered the heir. He then looked at Roxy and said that whoever failed the test would be banished from their family. He then asked if Roxy and Drake were ready to begin. The guy and the girl simultaneously said that they were ready. Then the father said that the purpose of the test would be to find the double blade hidden in the mountains. The person who finds it and brings it to his father will be considered the winner. Then the father clarified that it didn't matter how they got this blade, the main thing was that they couldn't kill each other. And then the father abruptly announces the start of the test. Roxy confidently begins to run in search. Drake just smirked, looking at the girl, and said that this was not a timed test. His plan was to take the blade from the girl when she found it and take it to her father. He remembered the moment when he left Roxy and Adrian. As he walked away from them, his phone rang. Drake picked up the phone and said he was listening. The voice on the other end of the call asked what was going on with the double blade. The guy said he would have to take a selection test, so it would take a little longer. The voice said that the guy was telling him this for the second time. Then the voice said that the guy was already late on time. Drake got nervous. He quickly began to apologize to his opponent, but he dared to ask whether the man would fulfill his promise if he could obtain the blade. The man replied that it was a promise made in front of the constellation, so he was obliged to keep it. Drake said goodbye to the man and became even more focused on his goal. He thought that this was his last chance, so it was time to go. Roxy was already looking for this blade at this time. The girl emitted mana around herself. She felt the trace of the double blade's magic. Roxy realized she needed to concentrate, which would take her 15 minutes. The girl heard someone ask if this was a magical trace of the blade. She turned around, sword at the ready, and saw Drake behind her. He asked if she could find a trail using magical tracks and asked who taught the girl to do this. Roxy began to pull the blade out of its sheath with a displeased look, calling Drake by name. The girl remembered how she approached Adrian with a question about magic control. Adrian said he thought Roxy knew the basics. He asked if the lightning powers that the girl had mastered were basic knowledge. Roxy agreed with that. The guy told her to start practicing the magic field control, but not a large area. She asked how she should do it. Adrian was a little puzzled by her question. Hadn't the girl been taught this in her family? She remained silent in response, looking at the floor. Adrian decided that it didn't matter and clarified that Roxy only knew how to borrow the power of the constellation and how to collect magical energy. She confirmed his words. The guy scratched his head. saying that he wasn't very good at it either. He told the girl to first relax her entire body and use her fingertips and toes to weakly spread her magic and not to talk. Roxy followed his instructions. Adrian said that magic must be spread slowly. In this state, the girl needs to try to feel the magic in the air. She needs to feel the magic. Roxy felt the magic coming from Adrian. The girl, who had been focused and with her eyes closed until then, opened her eyes wide in surprise. She exhaled. Adrian noticed it and asked if she felt anything. Roxy said she felt a form of magic surrounding the boy. He explained to her that this was one of the ways to sense magic. The girl could even notice the weak magical energy that flowed out of the body. This was one of the things that the girl could do with precise control of magic. Adrian said that the more often you use magic, the easier it is to feel the remnants of magic on the ground or in the air. Roxy replied that she understood him. If a girl can see the magic of things, then she can also determine in what form magical traces are formed. If Roxy trains more, she will be able to see the silhouette clearly. The rest she should learn without Adrian. She agreed with this. Having finished remembering, the girl stared at Drake with an angry look. Drake approached the girl, wondering who Adrian was, but then said that he realized something. He asked if Adrian was the shameless guy who was with Roxy before. Did he really have talent? Even though he just looked stupid. The girl gritted her teeth, irritated by Drake's words. She said that Adrian was much stronger than Drake, and asked why Drake came here. Why? Drake repeated after her with a grin, drawing his sword from its sheath. His sword sparkled with purple light. The guy crossed his sword with Roxy's sword, ready to strike, saying that's why he was here. His eyes widened, not expecting this. Roxy pushed him away with her sword. Drake flew back a short distance, tearing the blade of his sword away from the girl's blade. The guy was confused. He didn't understand when Roxy had become so strong. Adrian concentrated on his fingers. He stood, focused on the magic, the blue light around him. Adrian was slightly surprised that he didn't find what he was looking for. He has so many hiding places, and in Valhalla there is only one. At a distance from him, something on the ground began to glow with a blue magical light. Adrian chuckled with pleasure, rejoicing to himself that he had found another hiding place. The guy shifted his gaze, paying attention to something. He heard something among the trees. A giant flash appeared in the distance in the forest. Roxy continued to fight Drake at this time. Drake lunged at her. The girl once again swung at the guy. Their swords clashed blades. Drake stared at the trembling blade of the sword in his hands, dismayed. He asked the girl with a grin if she was learning to be a wild boar at the academy. Drake saw that she had become physically stronger. Roxy told Drake to give up the double blade. The guy asked her if she was crazy. He rushed at the girl, declaring that an illegitimate child like her did not deserve this. Roxy stood with her sword at the ready. Her sword glowed blue. The guy was rushing with a sword towards the girl, who had already swung her sword in response to his attack. Roxy turned the sword. She dealt a powerful blow to the guy with her sword. The girl waited for the moment when he dropped his sword. Roxy slashed the hilt of her sword at Drake. The guy exhaled from the blow. He fell on his back to the ground, along with his sword. The girl exhaled, changing the position of her sword. She didn't think she would be able to land even one blow on Drake, but in the end, the girl was able to defeat him. Roxy moved to pick up the fallen double blade from the ground. Drake asked the girl if she really believed that he could defeat him by catching her off guard. The boy rose from the ground, surrounded by magic, holding his sword in his hands. He clarified that he had already said this before. Drake thought that Roxy's strength was ridiculous. She couldn't defeat someone who signed a contract with a constellation. The guy got hit because he was caught off guard. Now he was going to kill the girl. Roxy noticed the magic surrounding Drake's sword and asked if he was a villain. The girl asked him why. The guy threw his sword over his shoulder and asked why she asked. Drake asked her why and swung his sword at the girl. Roxy drew her sword from its sheath. She swung her sword at the guy, but he dodged it in time. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. The guy pushed her away with all his might a short distance, his sword glowing purple. The girl gasped and fell to the ground. Drake asked her mockingly if she was going to get up. He said it would be better if she didn't do it. Roxy looked at the bottom of her shirt. There was a large dark stain on her stomach, clearly left behind by the blow. She tried to get up with a groan. The guy told her that if she didn't move, she wouldn't die. Roxy asked him when he talked about the contract, if that meant the guy had made a contract with the evil constellation. Drake explained that since he was the leader of the Jinsa Guild, he had signed a contract with a high-ranking constellation to save face. But for now, the guy was on the side of the betrayed. The girl had heard of the devotees before, the third most dangerous group in the world. She asked why he had made a contract with one of the devoted constellations, but the girl did not understand. Roxy wondered if the benefits of joining them were better, if they were better than enjoying life. Drake asked her if she was really interested and told her to listen carefully. He was attracted by the incredible strength and power, and the deviation in the need for feelings. The girl repeated after him, not understanding. Drake squatted in front of her, explaining that he joined the Jeans Guild at the age of 12. He has been working in their family guild since he was a child. At an age when the boy was only interested in games, the family expected him to become an exemplary eldest son. The reason why he is still in the Jeans Guild is because of his father's observation. It was never Drake's choice. Even as a teenager, the boy did not want this. It was then that he met one of the devotees. As soon as Drake met him, he told him to join the devotees. The man encouraged the boy by saying that Drake could fulfill the desires that lay in his heart. Perhaps this man already knew the guy's temperament. The girl clarified what Drake meant. Drake was referring to his disgust for humans. But he couldn't just join the betrayed. The guy had to fulfill a condition. Drake had to get his family's heirloom, the double blade. If Roxy had simply given up, there would have been no need to start the second selection test, and Drake would have simply been given the double blade. The girl asked if he meant the second blade. Drake was surprised that the girl did not remember. 10 years ago, the eldest daughter of the Chojin family, Roxy's older sister, participated in the first selection test. Roxy was shocked by it. The girl asked if her older sister had gone missing. Drake admitted that he couldn't control his desires during the selection test. Before searching for the double blade, the guy killed her on the mountain. Roxy froze after hearing such horrific information. After all, Drake failed to find the double blade back then, suffered a horrific injury and failed the test. If not for that, he might have joined the betrayed 10 years ago. His father somehow found Roxy's sister and hospitalized her in a feeble attempt to save her. Drake left his sister there, hoping she would disappear. Roxy asked where her older sister was now. Drake asked if she wanted to look for her. He stated that Roxy would be better off disappearing. Roxy's mother once fainted because she saw her daughter's face in Roxy's face. Roxy, hearing this, looked at Drake with a very angry look. Now Drake knew where the double blade was, so he decided to chop the girl down with a sword, mockingly asking her to say hello to her sister. The blade was already approaching Roxy's neck. Something happened, something that puzzled Drake. Drake's blade was stopped by Adrian with the sheath of his sword, thus saving the girl. Adrian asked what Drake was doing. He replied that it was a family matter and asked Adrian not to interfere. Adrian asked what kind of crazy family this was that would put a knife to their sister's neck. He pushed Drake away from himself and Roxy with force. Drake collided back into a tree from the impact. Roxy looked at what was happening with a tired look. She called out Adrian's name. When the guy turned to her, the girl asked why he came here. Adrian looked at her. He thought that he came here for his hiding places, and one of them was located just in this direction. The girl held the wound on her stomach. Adrian glanced at the spectacle. He turned away and said that he simply had business in that direction, and advised the girl to step away and gather some magic to heal the wound. Roxy agreed with his proposal. Drake wondered from his position who Adrian was that appeared so suddenly, and asked if Adrian was the student Drake met in Valhalla. Drake stood up and repeated that it was a family matter. He shouted that Hadrian must die and rushed towards him, deciding to stab him with his sword. Purple magic sparkled around his sword. Adrian stopped Drake's sword with his hand. Drake hesitated but struck again. Adrian dodged the sword strike, confusing Drake. The boy turned his sword with the hilt forward. He hit Drake with the hilt, telling him not to aim at a guy who was standing still. Drake should think that such a guy might dodge. Blood began to squirt out of Drake's mouth. He began to fall to the ground, and Adrian pounced on him from above, attacking with his sheathed sword. Drake was surprised that his opponent was prepared for his attack. He was stabbed in the stomach with a sword again. Adrian's blow was so powerful that the ground beneath Drake's body cracked. The guy remained lying on the ground with his mouth open. Adrian raised his sword, stopping his attack on Drake. He turned to the girl, asking her how she was feeling. The guy asked if Roxy was able to walk. She was not sure and decided to try. A purple glow appeared on Adrian's cheek from the direction of the fallen Drake. He and the girl looked towards what they thought was the defeated boy, whose body was radiating purple dark magic. Barchi said that it was sword magic. Adrian knew this, and assumed that Drake was also a villain. Drake stamped his foot. He stood up from the ground, holding his sword in his hand, purple magic visible around him. Drake called Hadrian just a newcomer to Valhalla. He leapt high towards Adrian, swinging his blade, asking if he thought he could defeat the guild leader. Adrian parried his opponent's attack with his sword. Drake noticed with irritation that despite the fact that he had hit the guy with magic, he hadn't even moved from his spot. Adrian asked Drake again about the guild leader. He pushed Drake away again. asking if he really believed that being a leader would help him. The guild leader groaned from the strong blow and glared at Adrian with hatred. Drake couldn't believe that a 17-year-old boy could have such strength. He managed to block all his attacks and even counterattack. Drake realized he had no choice but to use it. It has a lot of side effects, but if the guy gets hit again, it's all over for him. He held the purple pass stone in his hands. With the help of the stone, Drake will be able to make a virtual contract with the constellation, so he bites the stone. Adrian stared at the boy in front of him in confusion. Drake chuckled, after which he laughed, spreading his arms out to the side, purple and black magic surrounding him. At the entrance to the test site, a crowd of people were puzzled by what was happening. It seemed to them that an earthquake had begun. One of the girls in the crowd pointed somewhere, attracting everyone's attention. They saw dark purple magic in the distance, reaching up, and wondered what it was. The man was shocked by the sight. This is sword magic, dense enough for the general public to see. And there is also the double blade. Such an event in the middle of the selection test, he had to go and see what was going on there. Adrian looked at the guy in front of him, enveloped in the magic of the sword. He said he watched what Drake was doing, but he ended up just amplifying the magic. Drake stated that Adrian was too stupid to understand this. The magic boost was just an additional effect. This is part of the power he received through a temporary contract with the constellation. Drake stated that Adrian would die here, and behind Drake, the silhouette of a dragon became visible. The dragon that kills everyone recognized the sacred relic and descended. The dragon showed its teeth, as if glad to descend after a long time. The dragon activated its all-seeing eye ability. Adrian raised an eyebrow slightly, but he still didn't look scared or impressed. The dragon's eyes widened, taken aback by this reaction. He stared at Adrian in horror. The dragon has deactivated the all-seeing eye ability. He activated the ability again. The dragon was terrified. The creature exclaimed that it had to get out of here. Drake asked him again in confusion, calling him Sir Constellation. The dragon rejected the call and terminated the temporary contract. The constellation took its power and fled. Drake stood there, puzzled, no longer able to stand. The guy didn't know what to do now. He was stabbed in the stomach with a sheathed sword. Adrian asked if Drake still thought he could defeat and kill him. He pushed the hilt of the sword with his hand. So Adrian knocked Drake's weapon away again and delivered a powerful blow. Drake's mouth opened wide in pain. He fell to the ground exhausted. The leader of the devotees, and also the Dragon King, was shocked when he saw the message that appeared, which he received from the dragon, who informed him that the leader of the devotees was causing him problems, and asked if he wanted to disappear from the mortal world. The man asked the dragon for forgiveness. The leader of the devoted hit his forehead on the floor in an apology. The dragon advised him not to distribute any more artificial relics in the future. The man hit his forehead on the floor again, saying that he understood everything, and the dragon told the leader to behave well. The leader of the devotees stood in place, his forehead pressed to the floor. The dragon's messages disappeared. The man began to rise from the floor. He did not understand what had made the constellation so furious. The leader realized that the guy he gave the relic to had done something wrong. The man got up from the floor. The leader asked the constellation what had happened, but received no answer. He decided to find out what happened. The windows of the Valhalla dormitory glowed at night. Adrian opened the door to his room. He exhaled as he entered the room and took the backpack off his back. The guy put his hand in his backpack, looking for something. Adrian smiled, rejoicing that he had finally gotten what he wanted. He took out the divine arts that looked like a book. Barchi asked him about the divine arts. Adrian said that this was the main reason why he was looking for the caches. Divine arts is a breathing technique that can raise a person's magical power to a very high level. Constellation asked if there was a difference from the breathing technique that Adrian used before reincarnation. Adrian said that his early breathing technique was complete garbage when the guy was a nobody. He just bought it at the market, mastered it, and used it until the very end. Barkey said that he understood it. Adrian continued to think to himself that when he found this divine art 300 years ago, the boy couldn't change his breathing technique since it was already ingrained in his body. When he fought with Barchi, he suffered greatly. Due to his poor breathing technique, he ran out of magic power. But Adrian can start all over again with this new body, so he discovered the divine arts. He was going to stop training his body for a while to study the divine arts. Barchi reminded the guy about the situation earlier and said that Adrian left Roxy injured along with Drake. Adrian explained that he heard someone approaching, so he left them there. He thought that the guy and girl were capable of dealing with it themselves. Adrian remembered standing in front of the boy who had fallen to the ground. Drake's body lay on the ground, face down. Barchi asked if Adrian killed him. The guy thought to himself that he couldn't kill Drake. He had already been involved in another incident in Valhalla, so if he was involved in another one, he would be in trouble. There were some tiny traces of magic left on Drake, which meant he would survive. Adrian asked if Roxy could stand up. She said she could. The guy wanted to say something else, but he heard the sounds of someone approaching. Adrian thought it might be Roxy's family, and their proximity would make it more difficult to find the hiding places. He turned to Roxy. Adrian said that most likely her family was coming to the scene and told the girl to sit and wait. He needed to do something, so he was already leaving. The guy asked her to tell the family that it was Roxy who beat Drake. Adrian, putting up the hood of his sweatshirt, said that he had used too much force, which was why Drake was unconscious, and said goodbye. Roxy said she understood and said goodbye too. Having finished his recollection, Adrian lay down on the bed. He thought that once he mastered the divine arts, he would return the remaining storage stones, so the last time the boy absorbed their magical power, he was unable to absorb it all due to his own low ability. Adrian thought he should take a rest. At this time, in the Choijin family's house, people gathered around the table for a meeting. The man at the head of the table said that thanks to the press that came to film their family's screening test, articles came quickly. He asked if they had all been read, and one woman confirmed that most of the articles had been read. One article suggested that the Choijin family is related to the devotees. There was more than one such article. The man called it chaos. He couldn't believe that someone from the Choijin family could be a villain. In addition to this, the association published an official letter and he received a statement from the association. When something like this happened to the Ventric family, it had nothing to do with the Choijin family, so they simply kept quiet. But in this case, that approach won't work. Drake was handed over to the police. The man inquired about Roxy's condition. He was told that she had been sent to the Choijin family hospital for treatment. The girl's wound is significant, but her organs are normal, the bleeding has stopped, and she will not need any major surgery. The man, hearing this news, sank back in his chair with relief. One of those present reported that there were also several articles about Roxy. In them, Roxy was called a genius for being able to defeat a member of the devotees while being an ordinary student. The man asked if there were any articles about the girl going against her family. The selection test ended in chaos, but the next head of the family was confirmed, and articles like these will help Roxy firmly establish herself as the successor. The man agreed with this. It's good that Roxy has a legitimate chance of success, but defeating Drake on her own is weird. He remembered finding the girl. She sat, clutching her wound, next to Drake's body. Then Roxy said that the guy attacked her with evil magic, so she knocked him unconscious. She was asked how she managed to do this, because a lot of magical power was visible above the mountains. The girl was lifted from the ground by bodyguards. She replied that Adrian taught her. The man decided to search for information on the internet. He found an article about how Adrian openly told the guild guides to go to hell. In Valhalla, day had already come. Adrian walked up to his desk. He shifted his gaze, paying attention to something. Roxy sat at her desk with her back to Adrian. Adrian sat down in his seat. He thought Roxy should have been hospitalized, but she seemed to be okay. The girl turned towards the guy. She smiled at Adrian and waved her hand at him. The guy, one of a couple of guys walking behind him, thought the girl waved at him and was surprised. His interlocutor said that Roxy would never wave at him. Adrian remembered how he studied the divine arts. He held his hand out in front of him, palm up. Then, the guy received a message from Roxy. She said that she would not be able to attend training for some time. The doctor forbade her to take part in any physical activity and sent a sad smiley in the form of a hair. Adrian thought that considering the bleeding the girl had, this was quite expected. He said he was going to do his own thing for the next few weeks so the girl could do whatever she wanted. Roxy started sending a bunch of nodding bunny emojis. The guy demanded that she stop. Barchi said that Adrian needed to know something. The black magic they encountered seemed familiar to the constellation. Adrian asked if Barchi remembered anything about this. He said no. In connection with this, the guy asked what was going on. It wasn't that Barchi didn't want to remember it. It was that something was blocking his memories. Adrian assumed it was because of the scoundrel Barchi had mentioned last time. Barchi wasn't sure, but if he could fulfill the second condition, perhaps it would help overcome this mental block. But that was just his theory. Adrian thought about the second condition, the Eye of the Great Forest. The guy thought it was just an area used to evaluate performance, but this is where the final practical exam takes place, and apparently people with the lowest combined scores for the midterms and finals will be eliminated. Does this mean that all Adrian can do is wait for the final exam, which seemed like a waste of time to him? Adrian, sitting in class, thought that he still needed a little time to get used to things, and then he was going to go in search of the great eye of the forest. The teacher, who entered the classroom, ordered everyone to sit down in their seats when he entered the classroom. Before he starts the lesson, he needs to make a short announcement. The teacher asked if everyone knew about the inter-academy competition that would take place next month and received an affirmative answer. Barchi said the teacher had already mentioned this after the midterm exam. Their school was thinking about choosing their members, so the school planned to choose the best students based on the results of the midterm exam. After telling this, the teacher told Adrian to follow him. The guy was slightly surprised. The teacher and Adrian came to the office. The man noticed that they often met here. The guy agreed, since the man often called him here. The teacher confirmed that this was true and said that he needed to talk about Adrian's participation in the inter-academy competition. The guy immediately refused. The man said that he hadn't even gotten to the important part. Adrian asked what kind of competition this was. The teacher was sure that he had told about it in class, but was ready to tell it again. There are 3 major hunter training institutions in the world, one of which is Valhalla Academy in Korea, the second establishment in China called White Lotus, the third establishment in the USA called Heroes. Each of the 3 academies selects several first-year students as representatives and invites them to participate in a competition that includes sparring, escaping a maze, and more. Valhalla Academy plans to send those who scored the highest on the practical exam. Adrian yawned demonstratively, and the man asked if he was interested. The teacher explained that if their academy had won first place, not only would all the participants have received a scholarship, the boy interrupted him, saying that they would have been showered with money and all that. Adrian is not interested. The teacher said that he knew that he wanted to get into the eye of the great forest. Adrian asked him again, puzzled, as he did not expect such a phrase. The teacher explained that the eye of the great forest is the place where the final exam will take place. The final test in the competition will be entering the eye of the great forest. This will be basically the same as the final exam, and of course those who complete this task will be exempt from the final exam. But if Adrian fails the test, he will have to wait for the final exam. Adrian confirmed that he understands everything. The guy agreed to take part in the competition. It was already dark, and the windows of the Ventric family estate were lit up with light. The head of the family, a blonde girl named Adelia Ventric, asked how the preparations were going. The 2 men in front of her said that everything was going well, addressing her as mistress and bowing. However, the preparations would most likely take another month. Adelia told the men to continue in the same spirit. At first, the girl wanted to ask about Valhalla, but changed her mind and asked how Bob was doing. She was told that there were no violations to report. She told me to let her know if necessary. The men mentioned that they had heard some disturbing news, even though it did not concern them. Construction of a building made from paper money has begun at the market. The men believed that the Black Cat was responsible for this. Adelia wondered what he was planning, since the Black Cat had never done anything like this before. A message window lit up in front of her, the constellation ordering her to speak in more detail. The girl was surprised by the message she received. Market, Area 7. Banknotes were loaded using a crane. The Black Cat stood in front of the window, watching what was happening. He said that they are ready to do whatever the constellation tells them to do. But what is the purpose of building a building out of paper money? The brunette and red-eyed girl called it a gift for someone with a smile. The constellation was asked why it was ordering a building to be built from banknotes, to which it was told that the two-faced ruler was saying that it was a gift. The Black Cat wondered who this gift was for. He received a message. The two-faced ruler was wondering if the Black Cat had found the one who sold the ring. The Black Cat said that he didn't find it. All the seller told him was the main features of the face and the voice. But since the customer's contact information was recorded that day, they searched through all available records to find him. The constellation told the Black Cat to hurry. The teacher sat in the Valhalla Teacher's Lounge. He scratched his head thoughtfully, looking at the screen of his laptop. The senior instructor, Adam, approached him, put his hand on the teacher's shoulder, and asked if he had selected all the participants for the competition. The teacher confirmed that everything was ready. Adam asked to see the list of participants. Except for one participant, all of them are from the teacher's class. Adam noticed Adrian's name on the list and said it was surprising that the guy was participating. The teacher said that Adrian didn't agree at first. But once the man said that the competition would take place in the eye of the great forest, the boy suddenly changed his mind and decided to take part. Adam thought this was strange, since most people would hesitate to hear this, and the teacher asked if he was sure. The instructor suggested that Adrian simply didn't know what the eye of the great forest was, since the boy slept during the lessons during the explanations. Adam thought to himself that it looked like Adrian was attending the academy for ulterior motives. He asked if he could gather the students and conduct the training himself. The teacher agreed and said that he would change their schedule to accommodate the training. Adam left, wishing him luck, for which the man thanked him. A few days later, the students on the list gathered in the small hall of Valhalla, sitting on chairs, waiting. Among those present was John Davis. Olivia Yoshin was also present. Roxy looked around. There was also a student wearing glasses. Adrian sat with his hands in his pants pockets. Adam walked into the classroom holding a folder. He asked if everyone was there and concluded from the number of students that they were. The instructor was glad to meet those present. He was sure that the students had already seen him during the midterm exams, but still considered it necessary to introduce himself. The reason the students are gathered here is because of the inter-academy competition that will be taking place soon. So Adam will be talking about the training that the students will have to go through today. They will need to complete 3 tasks. The first task is a duel between students. It will be similar to the entrance exam that the guys have already taken before. The second task is a team battle. 5 academy members in a team compete against a team from another academy. All teams will be fighting at the same time, so the team captain's ability to navigate the situation is important in this task. The third task involves the Eye of the Great Forest. Hearing about this, Adrian began to listen more carefully. Even though the exam for the guys is still ahead, Adam is not able to give much information, but he can say that the Eye of the Great Forest is a labyrinth. The Eye of the Great Forest is a forest full of trees. Unlike a normal forest, the gates are heavily guarded and designed in such a way that anyone who tries to enter through them will be detained. The only way to enter is through the official gates. All the senior instructor can say is that each team will enter the Eye of the Great Forest. A specific task will be given on the day of the competition. Since there was nothing more to tell, Adam suggested moving on. He was going to explain the specifics and format of a team battle. The students already had experience working as a team during the dungeon raid. Adrian was slightly surprised when he realized that there would be no more explanation regarding the Eye of the Great Forest. He asked himself if there was a barrier. Couldn't the guy break through, but it seemed like it wouldn't be that easy. Adam finished talking about the team battle and decided to start explaining what their training would look like. The instructor asked if there were any questions. Adrian raised his hand. Adrian asked if it was possible to train alone. Adam said it didn't matter. If a guy wanted to train alone, he could do it. Roxy raised her hand and declared that in that case, she would also train alone. The man asked if anyone else wanted to train alone or ask a question. The students remained silent in response. Adam suggested that they leave it at that and said that they would see each other at practice. Everyone started to leave, but Roxy and Adrian remained sitting in their chairs. Adrian figured that he would have just enough time to master the technique before the competition began. He would absorb all the mana and would be in excellent condition as soon as the competition began. The guy will spend the rest of the time training his own body. While he was thinking about this, someone called him by name. Roxy asked the guy if she should just join the training. He asked why she was asking since she was originally going to train alone. Adrian also recalled that the girl mentioned that she couldn't train hard. Roxy began to remember her dialogue with the teacher. He told her then that he had read an article about the girl's condition, but thought it would be worth asking her personally about her desire to participate. The man asked if she would participate. The girl asked if Adrian would be participating. The teacher said that he heard that he would. Roxy said that in that case she was going to participate. The man told her that her wound was not yet healed. The girl thought that everything would be fine with her. After finishing reminiscing, Roxy thought that she was already halfway to becoming the head of the family. But thanks to Adrian, the girl found another goal. Her goal became to become stronger and help Adrian achieve what he wants to achieve, just like he once helped Roxy. Adrian was confused by her behavior. He noticed that she was talking at first and then suddenly stopped and laughed terribly, after which he repeated his question about hard training. The girl confirmed that she can't train hard yet. The guy then suggested not to focus on mana control for most of the training. He told her to stick to light walking in training and keep all energy to a minimum. Adrian said that when he finished his work, he would help the girl a little more and said goodbye. It was not quiet in some dark building in the evening. A guy tied to a chair begged 2 of the Samsala Alliance to have mercy on him. He asked to be released, promising to give everything his tormentors wanted. The bald man in front of him pulled out a knife with a smile. He threw the knife into the guy's chest, causing him to cough up some more blood. The guy bent over, losing consciousness, and his life along with it. A woman, Lisa, asked a bald man named Al if he could have killed the guy faster. Al said it wasn't that interesting. Lisa felt her phone vibrate and assumed it was a new order. Al asked if she had received a new target to kill, and the woman confirmed this. The new target was Adrian. The woman assumed that he was a student of Valhalla. The boy's body was hanging, tied to a chair. The man pulled a knife out of the corpse's chest. Al asked why they were ordered to kill this student. Lisa didn't know, but she thought the client had paid a lot of money. The man asked about the deadline. She replied that the employers wanted Adrian to be killed in a month during the competition. Al asked if they couldn't kill the student now. Lisa informed him that the academy and dorm security would stop them and asked if he wanted them to break through the protective barrier and kill Adrian. The man noticed that there would be other students present during the competition and asked if that would be more dangerous. Lisa said she was told about it. The third day of the competition will take place in a place called the Eye of the Great Forest, a labyrinth made up of trees. The students must find their own way out of the labyrinth. Al asked if there would be an instructor with them. Lisa said that there would only be a large drone watching from above, and other than the guards at the entrance, the rest would be watching from the surveillance room. Al said they would have to hide and wait for the right moment. He didn't find that interesting. Lisa noted that they would still have to carry out the order. The man knew this. A month later, the first day of the competition arrived. Among the students cheering in the stands, Bob Ventrick sat with a gloomy look on his face with his companion Alice. He looked at what was happening gloomily. Bob remembered calling his father. He reported that he had received the money. His father Eden was pleased with this. The man wanted to say what to do with the money, but Bob interrupted him, saying that he would decide for himself what to do. The guy said that he ordered the assassination of Adrian from the Samsal Alliance. Eden asked in shock if the guy was serious. Bob reminded him that he had already said that there was nothing that could connect the man with his actions. The Samsal Alliance accepted the order and Eden was taken aback when she heard the name. Father had heard a lot about them, especially about the leader of the Alliance. The Alliance is a team of 3 people who work together to become invincible. The man asked him not to do anything that could give Bob away, and the boy agreed with him. Bob was sitting in the stands. The Alliance managed to send him a response that they would take care of Adrian's death during the competition. The guy thought that there was no need for him to stay here. He told Alice that they were leaving here. The man who approached the microphone greeted the students and everyone who came. He introduced himself as the chairman of Valhalla Academy. The chairman said that it was worth introducing the participants of the competition. The first participant is White Lotus Academy from China. Next, Academy Heroes from USA. The man was about to introduce the final participant. The final participant, Valhalla Academy from Korea. The competition will last 3 days. Today, the first stage will take place, a duel between students. The chairman ordered the representatives of the academies to return to their places and wait until they were called. Adam watched what was happening from above. It was difficult to guess his emotion from his gaze. The instructor heard his name being called. Jack Rover, the senior instructor at the Hero Academy, approached him, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Adam confirmed this by calling Jack third place, who asked not to call him that. He also said that Valhalla wasn't the only one who took first place. Adam agreed with this. Rover said this year will be different. He believed that the heroes would take first place this year. Adam asked why he was sure of this. Jack told him about the new contractor and asked if his interlocutor knew him. He confirmed it. The same guy they call the Destroyer, Logan. Jack reported that Logan's son is studying at Hero Academy. In addition, the son of the Destroyer came to the competition. Logan's son, Logan Jr. Adam said that in that case, he was looking forward to seeing what the guy was capable of. Jack reported that Logan Jr. had already signed a contract with his father's constellation. Adam clarified, a contract with the Destroyer of everything. He asked if the boy used the same destruction as his father. Jack said that he could use destruction, but he was not as good as his father. Rover heard that the new students of Valhalla are also strong, especially Adrian. The man heard that the guy caught and beat the villain. Adam confirmed this and said that Roxy was able to repeat it. Jack noted that they were then worthy opponents for Logan Jr., considering that he easily defeated adult contractors. Adam just chuckled, and Rover noticed that it was too weak a reaction. The participants of the first round have been determined. Adam said that Jack would understand his lackluster reaction after he watched the match. The first to face off were Adrian and Logan Jr. The boys representing different academies stood in front of each other. The rule is the same for all matches. The winner is the one who first knocks the opponent unconscious. Even if one of the fighters deals fatal damage, the stadium system will automatically reduce it. Instead of fatal damage, an electric charge will be dealt, which will knock out the target so the opponents can feel free and give it their all. There will be no external interference. The protection system will be in effect until the end of the fight. Students should keep this in mind when they hear the start command. They will need to start the fight. Adrian wondered why such a security system would be used. Barchi explained that competitors must be in good health to participate in the next trials. Logan Jr. waited tensely for the countdown to end. And then the number 1 was spoken. As soon as the start command was given, Adrian swung his fist at Logan, but he failed to land a blow. His fist was clenched by Logan's hand. He asked if Adrian was really so confident in his strength. Logan held the guy's fist, preventing him from striking. Adrian said he didn't think so, and he still had a long way to go. Logan noticed that the guy was more modest than he thought. Adrian said modesty isn't as important as the fact that he's still growing in skills. The guy asked how long Logan was going to block his punches. Adrian grabbed Logan's fist, lifting him off the ground. He swung his other hand, clenching it into a fist. Adrian delivered a powerful blow to his opponent's chest. Logan fell to his knees, noticing how hard the blow was. Adrian said that his opponent was stronger than he expected. He thought that Logan would pass out after the first blow. Both instructors watched what was happening. Adam noted that Logan was really strong since he withstood Adrian's blow. Jack watched the fight in shock. Rover had already seen Adrian perform at the inauguration ceremony. But the guy wasn't that strong back then. Jack thought that this was not the end. Logan hasn't used destruction yet. Golden magic appeared in the boy's hand. He tried to hit Adrian in the head, but he dodged. Logan's hand only tore away the ends of his hair, but golden light still emanated from it. Adrian's eyes widened. He kicked his opponent away, asking what he was doing. Adrian touched his hair where Logan had chopped it off, and he noticed that if his opponent had aimed better, he would have hit him. Logan exhaled, shocked that Adrian had only hit him twice, and Logan already felt like he was about to faint. He thought that if he couldn't hit with destruction, there was no point in using it. The guy thought about the solution. He had another way. Logan touched the floor with his palms, glowing yellow as it began to crack. The cracks increased in size and length. Adrian asked calmly why his opponent was destroying the floor. Logan stared at him. Pieces of the floor rose up, causing Adrian to be surprised. The debris began to block Logan's view, and he reasoned that Adrian wouldn't be able to dodge the attacks if he couldn't see them. Logan was going to attack from a blind spot. Adrian noticed an enemy sneaking up on him. Logan stared at him in shock, realizing he had been noticed. He touched the floor with his hand again, thinking it was too late. One of the fragments hit Logan in the face. Adrian asked if Logan was serious about hiding behind the rubble. Wouldn't it be easier to attack directly since he uses magic? Adrian hit the guy hard on the nose. Logan fell to the floor unconscious. The first round is over. Adrian from Valhalla Academy has won. Jack's mouth dropped open in shock at this, and Adam explained that this was why he had acted so calmly. He called Adrian a monster. In the next round against the White Lotus disciple, the guy also emerged victorious. He also defeated a student from the Heroes. In the final round, Adrian had to fight Roxy. The girl noted out loud that they had reached the final round, but both of them were Valhalla students, so it seemed like their academy's victory was guaranteed. There is no reason for this round to be held other than to determine the ranking. The winner would receive a scholarship, but the girl didn't care, so she asked if she should concede the victory. Adrian said that he didn't care who won either, but told her not to give in. Since they were here, it would be remiss not to show off her skills. The guy wanted to know how much better Roxy had become. Adrian asked the girl to attack with all her strength and said that he would take her injury into account. Roxy understood him. She took out her blade and assumed a fighting stance. Adrian swung his fist with a smile. The chairman watched what was happening in the arena in shock. Jack grabbed his head. Even instructor Adam looked surprised. The students representing Valhalla were also shocked. Roxy was lying on the floor. There were a lot of cracks around her, and her blade was lying next to her. Adrian was standing with his fist outstretched, and was clearly to blame for the girl's current state. The final round was declared over, and Adrian, a student of Valhalla Academy, was declared the winner. Barchi noted that this was quite ruthless of Adrian, since he said that he would take the girl's injury into account. Adrian said that he really restrained himself since he did not hit her in the stomach. It was his improvisation. Roxy's blade was trajectorying towards the guy's stomach, so he punched the weapon. Adrian had definitely gotten stronger. His mana pool was increasing. He could now hold a little mana. The guy looked at the girl lying face down on the floor. He noticed that Roxy had also become stronger. It was already dark, but the windows of Valhalla Academy were still lit. Adam called the disciples great. He asked if everything was okay with them after the test, and the students unanimously confirmed that they were feeling well. The instructor said that thanks to the protection system, they were not harmed, but just in case it was better to go to the infirmary and get examined. He decided to tell them about tomorrow. Adrian thought it was a waste of time. He didn't understand why he had to wait another day to get to the eye of the great forest. Adam finished telling his story and told his disciples to go and rest. The instructor walked down the dark corridor. Someone called out to him. attracting his attention. It was Adrian who caught up with the man. Adam asked what he wanted. The guy wanted to say something about tomorrow's battle. Adrian asked if he could finish the test early so he could move on to the next task. Adam asked if he meant the Eye of the Great Forest. The instructor said that this had never happened before, and he needed to look it up in the rules. There are 2 rules. Only 1 challenge is allowed each day, but there are exceptions. If the test ends quickly, the student may move on to the next test at the discretion of the teacher. If the test location is not ready or the student is in an unsuitable condition, he is given time to prepare for the test. Adrian noticed the point about instructor discretion and asked what the instructor thought about it. The guy asked if he could move on to the next challenge. Adam said that if Adrian finished the test early and went into the teacher's room, he would allow the student to start the next test. Adrian said that he understood the instructor and said goodbye. Adam wished him good night in return. Barchi asked the boy if he was going to complete the test with the Eye of the Great Forest tomorrow. Adrian confirmed this and was glad that he knew about this test in advance. Barchi understood this. Constellation assumed that Adrian wanted to attract the attention of students from other academies. Adrian called him a fool. Barchi said it was a misunderstanding. Adrian decided that he had to complete the test anyway. The next day came and everyone was back in the fighting arena. The chairman again greeted everyone present and was about to explain the rules of the second test. Today they have a team competition. 5 representatives from each academy will compete together. The test will take place in the mountains, so the audience will watch the events through holographic screens. The image will be transmitted to the screens using special drones. The Valhalla team was warming up. Olivia asked where Adrian was. The competition was about to start. The guy just approached them, apologizing for being late. Olivia indignantly asked why he came so late. Adrian admitted that he overslept. The girl noticed that he should have arrived 30 minutes earlier and asked if he had been listening to the teacher. The guy said that he had been thinking about other things at the time. Adrian asked the girl not to start making noise. He said he would take care of everything. Olivia asked him again. She asked him if he understood what he was saying. Because this test was about teamwork, the guy said that he understood it. Olivia said that because Adrian had defeated the other academies, they would all be targeting the Valhalla students and asked if he was sure he wanted to go alone. The girl turned to the others, asking if they agreed with her. Roxy approached them. Olivia asked if the girl agreed with her. Roxy asked if she could go with Adrian. He refused her. She just agreed with him. And Olivia was shocked by her calmness. Adrian asked Olivia to stop tweeting and save her energy. The girl was confused by his choice of definition. The battle was set to begin in a few seconds. The guy said he would have another test in the afternoon. Olivia asked what he was talking about. Adrian started to walk away from the team. The girl called out to him. He called her noisy. The guy said he needed to prepare for the Eye of the Great Forest. The test had officially begun, and the White Lotus team was already prepared. But they didn't expect Adrian to sneak up and jump out from behind. One of the girls on the team recognized Adrian and told the team to get ready. The guy noticed that the girl reacted faster than he expected and swung his sword. Logan, a guy from the Hero Academy team, saw a notification. The White Lotus team was destroyed. This information shocked Logan. Only 10 minutes have passed since the test began. Logan realized that Adrian was heading straight for the White Lotus team. The guy thought that the Heroes team would catch up with them first. One of the team of heroes informed Logan that he felt magic in that direction. He was asked if it was the Valhalla team. It turned out that it was one person. Logan ordered Luke and Dan to hold the shield. Melissa was instructed to prepare a magic circle. Bella had to prepare the shield. The hero team was ready. Melissa clarified that this is one person. Why do they need such protection? Logan said that if it was Adrian, then they really needed that kind of protection. Bella noted that Melissa did not know the enemy's strength, since she had not fought Adrian. Melissa said that Logan is also strong. He asked not to compare them. One of the guys noticed that the magic was gone. Logan asked if Adrian had left. Bella assumed that the guy had left after defeating White Lotus Academy. The Hero Academy team was still holding the defense. At this time, Adrian was watching them from above. An idea occurred to Logan. He guessed that the enemy was from above. But as soon as the guy guessed, his face was already met with a sword in a sheath. Adrian smiled as he hit Logan. Logan fell to the ground, his team members only just managing to realize what was happening. Bella was caught off guard and quickly turned her gaze away in surprise. She also got hit by Adrian. He noticed that she was slow. Melissa held a ball of golden magic in her hands. She threw the ball at the guy, but he managed to dodge. Adrian hit the girl, asking if she really wanted to attack him with a blob of magic. While he was distracted by Melissa, Luke and Dan came up behind him. One of them was struck in the side by a sheathed sword. Adrian, of course, was ready, so he managed to attack. He hurt both guys with his blow. They fell to the ground, Adrian standing surrounded by a team of fallen heroes. He was glad that he could now go to the eye of the great forest. The chairman, who was in the observation room and watching what was happening in the test on the cameras, did not understand how this could have happened. Adrian finished the team fight in 23 minutes. But to be precise, he spent even less time on the fights, 3 minutes, and 20 minutes were spent on the road. The chairman noted that this was a problem because the situation was ruining the schedule. Adam said that he read the rules and they said that if the test was over by noon, then they could start the next test. The instructor would like to discuss this with other academies. The chairman asked to be informed of the results of the discussion. Adam agreed. Adam wondered if Adrian asked about it because he knew about his quick victory. The man found it frightening. Adam and Jack walked down the corridor. Jack said that they still needed to talk to the White Lotus, but the heroes didn't mind starting the test. The hero instructor was finally convinced of this when he watched the team test. He didn't think the result would change if they postponed the test. Now Jack understood why Adam called Adrian a monster. Adam understood him. He invited Jack to go with him and talk to the White Lotus. Meanwhile, the Valhalla team was in the break room. Olivia wiped her sword, glancing sideways at Adrian. She thought he was crazy because she didn't expect him to finish the battle alone. Olivia was going to take the initiative since the teacher told her to be the team leader, but she couldn't do anything. In addition, the girl lost in a personal fight with Roxy. Olivia heard that she was trained by Adrian and suspected that this was the case. At this rate, Olivia will continue to fall behind, which is something she cannot allow. The girl looked at Adrian, wondering if he would teach her if she gave up her pride. Her thoughts were interrupted by an announcement addressed to the students. Tomorrow's test with the Eye of the Great Forest has been postponed to today, and it will take place at 1 p.m. The students were asked to prepare for the test. Olivia noticed that everything happened as Adrian said. The guy said that before the test began, he needed to tell him something in advance. In the Eye of the Great Forest, Hadrian intended to act alone, and that everyone would survive on their own. He said that if anyone had any problems, they could call Adrian for help. Olivia thought, they had already won 2 challenges. If they didn't get the lowest score, they wouldn't lose. Even if it's a maze survival game, there shouldn't be many monsters there. Adrian looked at Olivia questioningly. He asked if Olivia wanted to say something and called her a bird, causing the girl to be confused. The girl indignantly asked why he continued to come up with nicknames for her. The guy said that now she was confirming her nicknames, and Roxy, who was watching this, thought that the nickname Bird was very cute. The students of the 3 academies stood before the gates of the labyrinth. The chairman announced a new test, Survival in the Labyrinth. As in the previous test, spectators will watch the events through holographic screens. Before the test begins, the chairman wants to talk about the maze. The Eye of the Great Forest, where the trial takes place, is a forest-shaped labyrinth, as the name suggests. Inside is a labyrinth unlike any other. It has a unique environment where it never stops raining, and the monsters are quite low level, so there are few factors that pose a threat. Rain and dense bushes are the real threat to survival. The test is how well a person can survive. When the students enter the labyrinth, their condition will be measured and checked after 5 hours. The closer a person is to their original condition, the higher their score. Fights between teams are prohibited. The chairman announced the beginning of the trial. The students entered the gates of the labyrinth. At this time, Al and Lisa were in an abandoned warehouse in Valhalla. They were informed that the students had entered the Eye of the Great Forest. The head of the Samsel Alliance, under the pseudonym Alia, informed them about this. She said that it was time to go to the labyrinth. Some kind of magic is blocking the entrance to the labyrinth, and it is supported by 2 people, so we'll have to deal with them first. The Trinity teleported, illuminating everything around with purple light. Adam's eyes widened, astonished by something. The surveillance cameras were out of order, and their screens showed nothing but static. The chairman considered the simultaneous failure of all cameras to be suspicious. He asked his subordinate if he had contacted the gate guard, and he replied that no one was answering him. Adam noticed that the students might encounter unexpected problems, so he suggested entering the maze with Jack. The chairman agreed with his suggestion. They were in a hurry. A crowd of people with Adam at the head came to the labyrinth. At the place of arrival, they found a pile of giant stone debris blocking the way. It was raining in the labyrinth as promised. The hero team stood there, getting wet, looking dejected. One team member approached Logan. Melissa said that Bella wasn't feeling well. Bella was shaking but said she was fine. The rain was just unexpected and cold. Logan noted that if the girl got hypothermia, she would be eliminated. The team leader wanted them to at least get high scores even if they didn't win. He suggested building a hut to get out of the rain, so he ordered Melissa to collect large leaves and Dan and Luke to collect branches. Logan decided to level the ground and dig a hole. He noticed a purple and black portal ahead. Alice, who came out of it, asked why it was raining here. Al told her to forget about it, since they needed to finish the mission. Al said he would kill Adrian. The man, already holding it in his hand, noticed a surprised Logan. Al shouted that it wasn't Adrian. Alia, covering her head with her hands, explained that she teleported them to a source of moderately strong magic because it was the only way to find Adrian. Logan, who was listening to their conversation, wondered who these people were and if they wanted to kill Adrian. The guy felt black magic. He assumed that the Trinity in front of him were villains. Lisa said they couldn't leave any witnesses and told Al to deal with them. The man replied that he knew it. Logan cursed, a clot of golden magic already glowing in his hand. He formed a ball of magic and swung it, asking the three what they were doing here. The knife in Al's hands glittered. A blade pierced Logan's stomach. Al, who was behind the guy, asked if Logan had really insulted him. The boy stared at the man from behind with confusion. He asked how he managed to end up behind. The man advised the guy to look from the front. Turning around, Logan saw the second Al ahead, or rather the first. He was shocked by this. Front Al swung his knife. He plunged another blade into Logan's stomach, saying that it was his doppelganger. Logan fell with a splash onto the wet ground. Lisa asked if he killed him. Al said he would let Logan bleed out slowly. There was a cry of shock. Bella, with the shield on her back, found Logan fallen. Lisa again ordered the man to get rid of the witnesses. He agreed with her. Al asked if he could do whatever he wanted. The woman allowed it. All that mattered to her was that he finished faster. The man rushed towards Bella with a smile. Adrian ran through the forest in search. He noticed a notice about Madagairona's house. The guy wondered if there were any houses in the labyrinth at all. He only saw bushes and trees. Adrian ran past Melissa, who was holding leaves in her hands. The girl muttered something, after which she dropped the leaves from her hands and screamed. In front of her was Al, surrounded by the bodies of the other team members. Lisa was irritated by the appearance of another witness. The man wondered where they come from. Al suddenly noticed something. Adrian approached the frightened, tearful Melissa. Lisa smiled slyly, realizing that their target had come to them on its own. Al assumed that the guy was attracted by the screams, which is why he doesn't kill people right away. Adriana was tensed by the word goal. He lowered his gaze. The Hero Academy team lay on the ground as the rain pounded their bodies. Adrian ordered Melissa to deal with the wounded while he dealt with the enemy. The boy noticed that the defeated students were still alive. Adrian also noted that they looked like they didn't want to be killed right away. But why leave the students to bleed? He told the trio that they had spoiled his mood. Since they have gotten in here, he will have to get rid of them. Al decided that the guy didn't understand the situation he was in, because he was stuck in this labyrinth. The man explained that they had broken in through the only entrance to the labyrinth and had disabled the surveillance drones. Adrian noted that the teachers had already noticed this by then. Al said that they wouldn't be able to get here fast enough. The entrance was completely destroyed. It will take the teachers at least an hour. Adrian said just 1 hour. He raised his head, asking no one in particular if he had only an hour left to search. Al raised the knife, saying that he didn't understand what Adrian was talking about. The man and his double ran towards the guy from both sides. Al swung his knife forward. His blade only pierced the ground, missing the guy. Al was surprised by this. He and his double looked around, not understanding where Adrian had gone. Adrian cursed. He swung his sheathed sword at Ayla, shouting that he would kill them. The guy hit the man on the bridge of the nose. Al flew back a fair distance, blood pouring from his mouth.